I used to think freedom was freedom from obligations and freedom from commitments. But then I got like maximal amounts of freedom, and then I've cashed in that freedom for like.
So here's the thing. Can you actually build a life of freedom, fulfillment, and success? Most people will tell you no, that you have to choose money or meaning, freedom or purpose, contentment or ambition. But Ali Abdaal proves it's possible because he's done it. He's a New York Times bestselling author who's also built a multi-million-dollar business that he loves, that makes the world a better place, and that supports his ideal lifestyle. And he believes you can do it too. Today, we dive deep into his own journey, both internal and external, of building a life of freedom. What it actually takes, what most people get wrong about freedom, common traps people fall into, how your definition of freedom influences every aspect of your life, and so much more. Let's get started. So I think we worked together for like 6 months, like 3 years ago. I was looking back at my notes, and that was around the time you were writing Feel Good Productivity. A big thing you talked about a lot was don't be a guru, be a guide, right? That's how you kind of built your business. The advice you give a lot of people. Well, then your book came out and you're like mega best-selling author, all this other shit. So how does it feel to be the guide who became the guru? And I mean guru in like the best possible sense. Like, how does that feel?
It feels kind of good in some ways and also kind of scary in other ways. I think a big part of what you and I talked about, I was actually looking through our notes a few weeks ago, because I was like, I was searching some stuff on like my grain transcripts. And it was interesting how a lot of the stuff we talked about, like, were patterns that were continuing to surface around like my feeling of imposter syndrome around the YouTube channel and all this random, all of this stuff. I think 3 years ago, I had a lot more of it. And I was really focused on I don't really know what I'm talking about. All I can do is just share a few things that have worked for me, ... You know, that kind of idea. In the last 3 years, I have developed a little bit more confidence around the topics that I talk about, in particular when it's related to productivity, or even now increasingly when it's related to sort of starting an online business, where rather than framing it as, in my own mind, as, hey, I don't really know if this is going to work, I'm just sharing it just to see what happens. It's a bit more like, no, I've actually done this for long enough that I know that if the person on the other end does the things that I'm telling them to do, like A, B, and C, then they're going to get the result. It's just obviously going to happen. And that has been nice in a way of, like, if I'm doing talks and stuff and people are asking me questions, they kind of actually do view me as a guru in that context. And then it's been interesting kind of leaning into it, but sort of feeling weird about it because I don't want to go too far in that direction of like, this is what you got to do. But also like the meta on YouTube as well is sort of evolving, where a lot of the other creators in this sort of personal development / business genre, the titles and the hooks are all very guru coded. Watch these 5 minutes if you don't want to get left behind in 2026. It's like, if you can't spend 5 minutes on this video, then you don't deserve to be successful. It's like the pendulum has kind of gone in that direction. And so me and my team, when we're coming up with like titles and hooks and stuff for videos, we're sort of trying to lean into that a little bit, but feeling a bit like it's a little distasteful because I still prefer the vibe of being a guide. So I don't know. I have a weird relationship with the guide versus guru thing, but it's a bit all over the place.
Well, so like, okay, so one of the things with this show is really diving into like the inner game of entrepreneurship, right? Like the psychological side. So from an internal perspective, how are you navigating that? Because like for you especially, man, like you've been in the game long enough. You have a decently sized audience. I think right now you're currently like approaching 6 million just on YouTube and things. And you have that audience, but you also, you know what works. And like you said, right now the meta is be hyperbolic, be in your face, be super hyperbolic. Like, I'll teach you how to build a $10 million business in 12 months. And it's like, not unless you're starting with 20 million and you learn how to like blow 8 of it. Like that's not like, I literally saw it the other day. I was like, there's the no, like not if you're like solo starting out, like it's not a thing, but you know that those types of titles are going to work. You know, having a sense of confidence and being prescriptive works because people ultimately, a lot of times are looking for guidance, especially like in a lot of the genres and niches that, you know, you kind of have operated in. People want that guidance. They want that sureness. How do you navigate that of doing it in a way that people will click on it and respond to it, but in a way that feels aligned with integrity?
Yeah. So one of the strategies we used to think about this is that okay. So in the genre of like personal development, you can almost match any title with any content, as long as you're creative enough about it. So let's say I'm doing a video about uh, if I'm doing a video about Jocko's book Discipline Equals Freedom, for example, which we did the other day. Now, the title for that video could be The Ultimate Guide to Discipline. The title for that video could be Book Summary of Discipline Equals Freedom. The title of that video could be Watch This If You Don't Want to Get Left Behind in 2026. It could be I'm 32. Watch this if you're in your 20s. It could be How to Lock In to Finally Make $1 million. And it's like you can have all these different titles that still are fundamentally the same video about, hey, this is a book written by Jocko. It's pretty good. There's some good stuff in it. Here's what I'm going to tell you about the book. And then and as long as the hook, the first 30 seconds connects the title to the content. So if the title was like How to Lock In to Make $1 million, I would say something in the hook like, all right, if you want to make $1 million in the next 12 months, firstly, it's going to take a lot of work. And secondly, you're going to have to lock in. And one book that's really going to help you with this, that you should have on your bookshelf at all times, is this amazing book, Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, blah, 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 all of that shit. And so in the past, I used to feel weird about like clickbaity titles. But now the way I think about it is that as long as I can genuinely, with an open heart, deliver on the value of that title, then I don't feel so bad about it. And some people might be listening to this being like, oh no, but like I don't like the clickbait title meta. It's like I prefer it when the titles are a bit more honest. It's like, yeah, unfortunately I do too, but the data is very clear whenever we run A/B tests. The stuff that sort of reads as more confident, more sure, even more hyperbolic in many ways, just performs better amongst like an audience, like the audience as a whole, compared to stuff that's a bit more like, this book changed my approach to discipline. It's like, that's actually not going to get that many views in the 2026 meta compared to, this book will completely change your life, that kind of thing.
How do you think about audience capture and resisting the pull for audience capture?
It's a good question. How do I think about it? I don't think too hard about it, I think is the honest answer. I think like 4 years ago, I sort of veered too far in that direction, where I found that like whenever I would put the word productive in a title, then it would suddenly do well. And so I started putting the word productive or productively in like every single title for like 2 months. And it almost became a caricature of itself. It was like, like a productive day in the life, how to watch TV productively, how to like read books productively, how to listen to audiobooks productively. And it's like, it was fine, but I think it was fine in small doses. And I started to feel weird about it. I could sense the audience, based on the comments, was starting to like feel weird about it. All sorts of comment like, bro has found the hack on YouTube, just put productive in every title. And it also kind of just stopped working. So had it continued working, I might have continued along that vein. Because we're always quite like experimental with the stuff that we do, and we look at the data to see like, okay, is this working? Is it not? There's like a sense of it in terms of like, how do I feel about it? And then there's also the sense of how's it doing in terms of the data. So it's something I keep in the back of my mind. That story of that the food YouTuber Nick something.
Nikado avocado
Yes.
or something.
Yeah, that guy. Oh, is it always kind of in the back of my mind whenever we're doing stuff that I think is veering too far into the direction of audience capture. But I think in the personal development world, we're kind of quite far away from that line.
Mark Manson, he put out a video not too long ago about how he was completely shifting his podcast because of audience capture. Because he was like, look, between, pressure with sponsors or whatever, we know that certain people, if we have on, will get higher ratings, more views, and the sponsors will like that. But that has led to me occasionally having people on that I don't particularly care for or like, but we know that they'll bring a big audience. I am going to completely shift this podcast to not have that format anymore because I don't want to get, to suffer from audience capture. And I think once you get to a certain level, so, we talk about Nick Nikado or Nikocado, whatever the hell his name is. I think he later like got back in shape maybe, but he's like the poster child for audience capture, right? But it's also things like, like Jordan Peterson, right? Dr. Jordan Peterson. Early on, he kind of was a little, and whatever your opinions are on him, right? Like neutrally, he was more like centered with his criticisms of people. And then over time, more left-leaning people started to criticize him a little bit more. And then more right-leaning people started to accept him more. And just like over time, it was like, well, why would I try to remain neutral when this whole other half of my audience attacks me, but this half accepts me? And then it's like not even like conscious, but like you just slowly kind of like go toward that way on top of metrics validating that choice. How do you, on just like a personal, like internal level, like what is your compass of saying like, I'm not doing this for me anymore. I'm doing this for the metrics, or I'm doing this in a way that doesn't quite feel aligned to the way I want to be showing up and the legacy I want to be building?
Yeah. I often do things for the metrics, but I like to think that even when I'm doing things for the metrics, I still have this sort of internal barometer of, does this feel good? I basically ask myself the question of like, could this video be useful to at least one person? And therefore, like, is it worth creating? I would love to have the approach to metrics that's just like, hey, metrics don't matter. I'll just make whatever I feel like whenever I feel like it. But we're not fully in a stage where I want to do that. There's part of me that's like, well, if the business was making more revenue that was decorrelated from like my views on YouTube and stuff, then I would have a bit more freedom to just like literally do whatever I want. And one thing that you and I think talked about a few years ago was there was this idea of like, man, if I had 100 million in the bank, then I wouldn't need to worry about the money from YouTube at all, and I would just focus on making content I want to make, not the metrics. But I was hanging out with a friend who literally has 100 million in the bank. Well, I mean, he sold his holders company for 100 million, has like, I don't know, therefore 40 million in the bank. And he started a YouTube channel, and he really cares about the metrics. And I was like, bro, what's up with that? You're financially, like truly financially free. You really don't need to worry about the metrics. And he was like, yeah, but like, if I want to do anything, I want to do it well. And there's no point in doing it if it's not working, right? And that was an interesting viewpoint for me, because I realized that I was probably actually bullshitting myself in thinking that if only I had enough money, I would be able to do YouTube purely in a way I want to, and rather than worry about the metrics. Because you get all these rich people who are like insanely rich, and they write books, and they want the books to sell. They do videos. They want the videos to do well. They produce a TV show or a movie. They want it to do well. Like the desire for the thing to do well based on the publicly or privately available metrics, I don't think is a desire that will go away from having more money in the bank. I think that's more like an internal enlightenment or something like that. So yeah, we still play the metrics game, and while playing the metrics game, I ask myself that like, okay, is this video actually useful? And one thing that's been interesting on that front is it's always interesting looking at the comments on the videos. So still, for the most part, our comments are very, very positive, because it's personal development content, it's self-help. New audiences are discovering my stuff every day, and so it's like, it's not at the rate that they were discovering it during the pandemic. So like the numbers are down compared to the heyday of the channel. I kind of think the channel is on the plateau / a decline trajectory, like in the life cycle of YouTubers. But every day we're getting like, I don't know, a few hundred to a few thousand new subscribers. And also, on every video, there'll be a few comments that are like, bros run out of ideas. The content is getting repetitive. And in my mind, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, I've made like 1,000 videos at this point over the last 9 years. Of course, I've run out of ideas. Of course, it's getting repetitive. And the content is still also useful for people who have not heard it before. So it's just one of those things where I have to constantly remind myself, and the team now knows to constantly remind me that, hey, just because it's repetitive, and you said this before back in 2019, like literally no one who's watching us now watched that video in 2019, so don't worry about it. Maybe one or two people who are going to leave a comment did, but like it's fine. So that's like the sort of inner game that I try and navigate.
So a couple months ago, I did an in-person workshop for a Mighty Networks event, and one of the guys is on Ryan Holiday's team. So after, I do the workshop, we're doing like some like breakouts and things, or it was lunchtime, and we're hanging out in this small group of people. He and I are talking because like, I'm a Ryan Holiday fan. We're in Austin. So like we've been to the bookshop and things in Bastrop. And I got to meet Ryan at a KIT event and things, and we're all sitting here talking. And this woman who's prominent in her niche, she's like, oh, so what do you do? He's like, oh, I work for Ryan Holiday. She's like, who's that? And the rest of us laughed out loud before we could catch ourselves, because it was like, who the fuck doesn't know who Ryan Holiday is? But it's that kind of thing, man. It's like, you think you've repeated yourself, and you have, to yourself, your team, and like your core fans. But so many people have never come across your stuff. And that time is like, it's an epiphany for them. And that's what matters.
Nice. I like that. a dinner party, like when I was in London, and the conversation, like I just threw out the name Jordan Peterson out there because he'd gone viral for something or other, and like there were two or three people there who were like, "Who's Jordan Peterson?" And I was like, "Hold up, how have you not heard of like what?" And these were like corporate, like one was a lawyer, one was like a management consultant, one was like a hedge fund guy, and they just don't spend time on the internet. At least not that sort of the internet. And so I was just mind blown. I was like, I swear Jordan Peterson is his household name, for some people in good ways, for some people in bad ways, but it just goes to show.
Well, dude, like, so I would do jujitsu with Lex Friedman, right? So like when we moved to Austin, like we started training with Lex and shit. And it's Lex Friedman, like one of the biggest podcasts in the world. And and over the last few years, like, got to be friends and things. Lex is super cool. And sometimes we would see people, like I'd see people on the mats and they would walk up to him and be like, "Hey man, you want to roll?" They train. And then afterward, they're like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And Lex is just like, he's like, "Oh, I'm a researcher. I got a podcast." It's like, buddy, like that you're so but like, but it's just like that, right? Like there are people who don't know who Jordan Peterson is, or you, or Ryan Holiday, or like Lex, and like, it's so like, because we all kind of create our own little like echo chambers, and it's just like, oh, this is a household name to me and everybody I know, but outside of this, you're obscure. And that's just like, how do you navigate that? Because like, I'll preface, a couple months ago, I was at the grocery store, and this worker, he came up to me. He was like, "Hey, I've seen you in an Ali Abdaal video," to me. And I was like, this is the first time I'm getting recognized in public, because like my face was like for 3 seconds on this random fucking video that like now I got recognized. And it's like, I was like, this is so weird. Like I don't get recognized in public. You do, but there's also like, most people in the world don't know who you are. How do you navigate just being in public when there's that dichotomy of some people like know everything about you that you've publicly shared, and then other people, you're just a random person? Like mentally, how do you navigate that type of fame?
Yeah, I think it's like, for me, it's really not that hard. I'm not anywhere near famous enough to get like loads of public attention. So if I'm out on the streets, I will maybe get recognized once or twice a day on average. And that's quite nice. That's like a good level. The people that recognize me will, it won't be because I've gone viral for something dodgy. It won't be because they've seen me on some tabloid or on the news. It'll be because they're a nerd, and then I helped them with their exams when they were at university, or like they're beginner YouTuber and they've been watching my stuff on how to start a YouTube channel. So it's always quite nice. I generally operate from the assumption, unless I'm like specifically at a creator event where I'm like a keynote speaker, where I can just assume that people know who I am. I generally operate from the assumption that no one has any freaking clue who I am. And that's just quite a nice place to be. Similarly, even when I'm at creator events and stuff, I still operate from the principle that it's going to sound big-headed, but obviously I don't want to assume that someone knows who I am. So it's like, if introductions are being said, or if someone introduces themselves, I'm obviously going to say, "Oh, hey, it's nice to meet you. My name's Ali." And often they'll be like, "Oh, haha, yeah, I know." But I would rather it be that than I assume that they know who I am, because of course they're going to know who I am, because whatever. So it's really not too bad. It's like a good level of like micro niche fame amongst people who are thoughtful and interested in education and personal development, which I think is a very good place to be.
Yeah, because you're not a controversial person. You haven't built, your brand around it, which is great. But another reason I ask is like, a lot of people, parasocial relationships. A lot of people think they know you, but they don't actually know you, right? Like they know your content. And do you know who Brent Underwood is? He's the Sarah Gordo guy. He went in with like Ryan Holiday and Nathan Barry and some other people, and bought this ghost town. It was like an old, like,
the ghost town
town
guy. Okay, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ghost Town, exactly. Yeah, Ghost Town guy. I was hanging out with him at like a creator event a while back, and he was like, "Yeah, people will watch my YouTube channel about like the renovations I'm making, and then they'll visit Sarah Gordo, and then they'll come up to me and they'll be like, 'So I was thinking about that issue with the well you were talking about. Like we've been talking this.'" He's like, "But that was like a video from 8 months ago. I've already dealt with that." But like they're talking to me as if we're picking up the conversation. And like, just this idea of like, people think they know you, but they don't actually know you. So just like navigating society, social relationships, when you don't know what level of intimacy people think they have with you. Because like for you, man, you say people, sometimes criticize you in the comments. You are an easy target for some people because you're toward the top of productivity, right? So occasionally I'll see a video and it's like, whatever kind of bullshit. And like, you're like grayed out with like laser eyes, or like Hormozy's grayed out with like laser eyes and shit. Right.
Yep.
And like, typically I don't watch them because they're bullshit, but some of them are just clickbait. They're trying to say like, hey, he's a good guy. You're just skeptical. But my first thought is always, you don't know Ali. Whatever your opinion is, you don't know Ali. How do you deal with online hate for people don't actually know you, and they're just trying to like straw man you?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure I have a particularly good way of dealing with this. Firstly, I try and ignore it. So if I see a video with my eyes grayed out, with lasers coming out of my eyes, I will generally scroll past it and not actually watch the video. Sometimes if I'm feeling like I want a spiritual challenge, I want a challenge to the ego, then I'll watch the video anyway and just sort of try and do a Joe Hudson of like really just leaning into the feelings and really trying to savor the feeling of like feeling maligned or misunderstood or whatever. But for the most part, my approach to most of this stuff is to just ignore it. And yeah, it does feel bad. It feels like, if we put out a video the other day, me and Izzy, saying that, hey, we're doing this totally free, like productivity event thing. You can register, it's completely free. And we had like 75,000 people register for it. We had like 30,000 people show up. And we had a bunch of comments on that video that had hundreds of upvotes being like, bro has become a scammer. I can't believe he's inviting us to this free event because obviously the only reason he's doing that is because he's going to sell something. He's going to try and sell us something at this event. And that got like 300 upvotes on it. And obviously, like, I saw that, I felt bad, and I deleted the comment. And then there were a bunch of other comments being like, guys, what's wrong with you? It's literally a free event. Like, do you complain when Nike sells you shoes? It's like, he's like, y'all want to make money, but you're also just like fucking like hate it when someone else is trying to make money. And it's like a free event. So, what's up with that? But I did feel bad about it. I was like, wait a minute, am I a scammer? to invite people to a free event where out of 8 hours of content, we're maybe going to do like 10 minutes of like, by the way, you might want to buy this thing. Like, I don't think so, but it still feels bad, right? And I was exploring this with Izzy, and we were trying to figure out like, what is it about that feels bad? And I think part of it is like the feeling of being like unfairly maligned or something. Like if someone has fair criticisms of me, where they're like, hey, I read Feel Good Productivity. I think he's reaching in his thesis that like really productivity is about feeling good, because actually the study that it's based on was from 2003, and that's not been replicated. I'd be like, okay, fair enough. That's like reasonable criticism. But if it's like, bro is a scammer because he's running a free event, I'm like, come on, like that's just not even true. It's just that just feels unfair. And so in that context, it's like, and then I get over it and try and get on with my day.
Well, Rochelle, my wife, she attended it and she said she really enjoyed it. So at least one person didn't think it was a scam. So.
Love it.
But I think this is a really good point of like being maligned because people don't, either they take something out of context, they throw their own assumptions or insecurities at you. That's typically what it is, right? Like, one of the things I had to learn was don't create for your critics, like create for your audience, right? Like that's that's one of the biggest things a lot of creators struggle with is they're like, well, here's the thing I want to do. What might people think? Not just people, what might my haters think? Okay, cool. Let me add caveats. Let me do this. Let me do that. And it's like, by definition, your critics are never going to be satisfied because their sole reason for being is to criticize, is to find things to bitch about and to take things out of context. With all of your work with creators, productivity, with YouTube, now with the Lifestyle Business Academy and everything else, what are the biggest hindrances to people actually building a creator, a lifestyle business that facilitates freedom?
I would say it's about 20% tactical and about 80% like emotional or internal. So we now have like just nearly 100 students in our Lifestyle Business Academy because we've been running it for the last 3 months. And so we've seen quite a lot of data around, these are 100 people who have paid quite a lot of money to be in the program. They're really serious about starting a lifestyle business because they paid, as evidenced by the fact that they paid a lot of money to be in the program. We're like very meticulously tracking what they're doing in terms of how long they're spending trying to come up with a niche, how long they're spending working on their offers, what they're asking questions about, what they're asking for feedback on. And we've had like a handful of students that are really succeeding. And we're always interested in like, okay, what is separating out the ones who are really successful from the ones who are still like struggling? Struggling is a strong word because it's only been 3 months and this stuff takes time. But we've certainly had some students who are like, way ahead of the curve. One of the big things has been this idea of like tolerating discomfort. Coming up with a niche, coming up with a business idea, coming up with an offer, validating it in the marketplace, posting on LinkedIn for the first time. It feels uncomfortable for everyone. But some people feel that feeling of discomfort and they choose to not do the thing, or they choose to delay a bit longer or think about it for another 2 weeks or whatever. And some people feel the discomfort and they choose to post it anyway. They choose to send those DMs anyway to their network to get them on a call to validate their offer or whatever. And so either way, the person is feeling the same thing. It's just that some people view that feeling as a sign that they need to not do it. And other people view that feeling as what it is. It's merely a feeling. And they recognize that the feeling and the action do not actually have to be correlated. So that's been like a really big thing that I've seen. And a lot of our coaching in our office hours and workshops and stuff is really focused on helping people who are like, people will come to the coaching clinic with what seems to be a tactical problem. That like, hey, I can't post this on LinkedIn because it's not good enough yet. I'm concerned that if my coworker sees it, it'll reflect badly on me in their eyes, and then I might like get passed up for a promotion. It's like, but really what's underneath that is I'm really, really scared of judgment from people that I used to work with. And so our challenge as coaches is to sort of find the emotional thing that's underneath the surface level thing that they're asking us about, and try our best to acknowledge that this is a normal thing that they're feeling and that other people feel this way too, and that it's generally okay to push through the thing. Sometimes it's like truly tactical, like, hey, like my work employment contract literally has a non-compete, where we're like, okay, like we should really think about the limits of that non-compete and how it works. But for the most part, it's actually more emotional issues rather than tactical issues. And so literally we are adding in, like you did a great workshop on the inner game of entrepreneurship. People love that. That's now an official part of the curriculum that everyone has to watch. My wife Izzy is hosting like bi-weekly mindset workshops now because we're like, hey, this would be really helpful. And everyone we know who runs programs for beginner entrepreneurs ends up having like at least weekly, sometimes twice a week, like mindset office hours, because that is one of the major things that holds people back.
100%. I mean, that's everything of what I do, right? And you described it really well. I'm glad people enjoyed my workshop and it's become part of the curriculum. For me, man, like what I've learned is the majority of business bottlenecks are psychological bottlenecks in disguise, right? Like all the work I've done, whether it's like with experts who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs or like founders building $30+ million companies, so much like, and again, like they come in for tactics of like, how do I grow? How do I scale? How do I become a better leader to like manage my team better, some shit. It's always psychological at some point. So touching on like imposter syndrome. I know you've talked about imposter syndrome like on your channel and things. One thing you said to me has stayed in my brain every day since. When you came to Austin, we were getting tacos and I was talking to you about some of my ideas for like content I was going to create and things. And I was like, so one thing I want to do is create content that would target people at your level and higher. So clearly I wouldn't talk about imposter syndrome. And you said, why? I struggle with it. And so does everybody I know to some degree. And I told you, I was like, motherfucker, you're the reason other people have imposter syndrome. How can you have imposter syndrome, right? And the reality is, and I love that because like it made me check my own assumptions, is I have since learned to see imposter syndrome as liminal tension. So, and Laura, mutual friend, she talks a lot about like liminal spaces and things, the space between two spaces. For me, imposter syndrome, you talk about that tension people feel of, well, what if I post this? Like, who am I to do this, right? Imposter syndrome fundamentally is a belief that you don't belong in the room, whatever that room is, right? It could be like a physical room. It could be just a conceptual room, whatever. Even, you writing your book, it's like, it could be like, who am I to write a book that would be on the shelf with these other authors, right? Like, quote unquote, I don't belong. And Like you said, most people, when they approach that room and they feel that tension, they say, oh, this tension must be a sign I'm not ready and I should back off. Other people see that tension and they say, oh, this tension is a sign that this is the room I actually need to go into, because this is the room where growth happens. This is the room that I will evolve in, that I will improve in, and I can't grow unless I enter this room. How have you kind of navigated this liminal tension or this imposter syndrome in your own life and business?
Yeah, it's a good question. How have I navigated that? For me, a big part of it has been in the cognitive reframing of imposter syndrome, to literally the thing that you just said, that like, hey, imposter syndrome is a sign that I'm growing. I remember when I went on Diary of a CEO back in like 2021, when it was like a way smaller operation than it is now, but it was still like pretty big. And I felt a lot of imposter syndrome and was like, oh shit, like, there's like celebrities and stuff on this. And at the end, we were doing a vlog and I asked Stephen Bartlett, like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And what he said was, to me, I just recognize it as a sign that I'm in the right room because it's the room where I'll grow, or like words to that effect. And that has really stayed with me. And so I had a lot of it when I finished writing my book and I was doing the promo touring and stuff, because then you're on podcast and like on TV and stuff. And the media training that the publishers gave me is I was always keen to caveat stuff. I was like, but they were like, no, you've got 10 seconds. Fuck the caveats. Just like say the bloody thing. Like, don't worry, you got this. You know what you're talking about. It's fine. And so a lot of the coaching I got from the publishers around media training was actually around like just telling me that it's okay to state something with conviction. Because I felt weird about it, because I'm thinking of all the caveats in my mind of like, well, in the edge cases as to when the thing I'm saying doesn't actually apply. But they were like, no one cares. Like just say the thing. So that was very helpful. The other thing that helps is, just the cognitive reframe, especially around like creating content on the internet, which is that I'm not forcing anyone to watch this. Like I'm not gluing their eyeballs open with like a matchstick so that if they're forced to watch my content. Like if they don't want to watch it, they'll click off, or they won't click on the content in the first place. So really, by definition, the only people who are watching right now are the people that actually want to be watching. So, that's interesting. That means I'm not forcing them to do anything and they're just simply here because they feel like it. Okay, that's good to know. So that's been generally helpful. I did actually have this feeling of imposter syndrome yesterday. So within our Lifestyle Business Academy, we're adding in a coaching clinic themed around sales, because our students are doing sales calls and like trying to sell their offer. And I was thinking, I wonder if we need to bring in an expert to run the sales clinic, because I have only done about 50 sales calls in my life and I don't feel like much of an expert on sales. But there's people out there who are literally experts on sales, who've done hundreds of sales calls in their lives, so maybe we should do that. And so I was talking to one of our mentors about this, and he was laughing. He was like, bro, even though you've only done 50 sales calls, your students have done 0. So like, for now, you're still like far enough ahead of them that you can actually give them sensible advice. And at the point where they're doing more than 50 sales calls, sure, you can bring in an expert and all that kind of stuff. And that was just another reminder for me that like, okay, that initial feeling of discomfort that I had around not feeling like enough of an expert, actually getting the outside perspective that 50 sales calls still makes you way more of a guide to someone who's like done 0 compared to not that, was a useful reminder. So yeah, I still struggle with it from time to time. It pops up, but that's, I think, where having, trusted external advisors and mentors, and, sometimes, my wife is also a creator, so she'll recognize the imposter syndrome in me and vice versa. It's just quite nice to have a community of people that can recognize that for what it is.
Hey, real quick, if you want even more psychological insights to transform your business, your life, and yourself, check out the Creator Alchemy newsletter. New issues go out regularly and it's completely free to join. Go to creatoralchemy.com now, and as a thank you for subscribing, you'll unlock the Psychology of Success Masterclass, which is designed to help you build the foundations you need to succeed in life and business. It's based on strategies and insights I've developed over the years that have already helped countless creators all over the world do just that. So I'd love to send it to you too. Just go to creatoralchemy.com to get the newsletter and unlock the first lesson. All right, now back to the show. When did you have the greatest sense of imposter syndrome over the last 3 to 5 years?
A few weeks ago, I was asked to speak at this event here in Hong Kong. It's for an organization called YPO, which is like this entrepreneurs organization thing. But it was for a YPO chapter where like the revenue requirement to enter was like $20 million. And so it was this fancy ass like 8-course meal where I was like the guest speaker and everyone had businesses that were doing at least 20 million. 20 million was the low end. Like there was a guy with like a $500 million business, a guy with like a $2.3 billion business. And all of these people were there. And I was like the keynote speaker on the topic of personal branding. And I felt like, okay, well, I mean, I've got a YouTube channel, a personal brand. All these guys kind of want to build personal brands. They're interested in talking about it and stuff. But it felt really weird being in that room because, it was like fireside chat vibe and the host was asking me questions about like my own business and stuff. And in a way, it was kind of like I'm talking about personal branding and the value of personal branding. And yet the monetary value of personal branding to me is a lot less than these guys have ever made from not having personal brands. So like, what the hell do I have to say about personal brands? Where I'm like, yeah, if you have a personal brand, you could sell $29 courses to random strangers on the internet and make a few $1,000,000. And these guys are doing like hundreds of millions with their like e-com brands or with their like software companies or whatever. That felt kind of weird. But I mean, I recognized that feeling for what it was. I was like, okay, this is not about me. Let's just like, no one's actually, the whole like spotlight effect stuff. Like initially my thought was like, oh my God, people are going to realize that like, oh, my business is not making anywhere near enough money and therefore they're not going to take me seriously. And then I was like, okay, fair enough. I mean, I'm just here to share, they invited me. I'm here to share what I find is useful about personal branding. Take it or leave it. And that approach of like, take it or leave it, regardless of how rich the people in the room were, I found was really helpful. And everyone was super friendly and super nice. And like, it ended up being like totally fine. But so a lot of that fear was in my head, just kind of going into that room.
So how did you grow by the time you left that room? Like, how did it change you?
That's a good question. Yeah. It made me really, it sort of reaffirmed to me that even the like biggest entrepreneurs are just like normal people. They all had like families and like, we're talking about like difficulties with their kids or like in their relationship or like, problems in the business. And whether they were making $2 billion or $200 million or $20 million or not, it was all the same sort of stuff. So that was quite nice. I was like, oh, these guys are normal people as well. Because I think it's very easy to pedestalize people who have sort of external metrics of success. It's like, the first time I met James Clear in person, we just hung out for a couple of days at this event thing. I was like, oh, just like normal dude. Just worked really hard on his book and like, he's done a great job. Normal dude. Nice. That's good to know. Yeah, well, when I'm in these rooms, the main thing I always take away from them is that, these guys are all just normal people. Love it. That's actually really good to know.
So when we first started working together, that was kind of how I felt. So for people who don't know, years, like I said, 3+ years ago, you put out this video that was like, here are the 8 challenges I'm having in life and business. I watched that. It was like a 40-minute video. And I was like, holy shit. I got fired during COVID from my therapy job. I have all this psychology background, but nowhere to put it. I've just started my own business doing, coaching and shit. I've started writing and things. I followed this Abdaal guy for a minute. He seems cool. Holy shit, this video is exactly what I help people with. So, I wrote up this like long ass article. Like I didn't edit it at all. It was like a 20-minute read, put it up on Twitter to my 500 followers. And I was like, hey, if y'all can just share this, maybe you'll see it. You saw it, you're like, hey, this looks great. Will you be my coach? And, and then we talked back and forth and then it finally happened. And I remember like getting on the call and thinking like, this is a real motherfucker. Like he's a real entrepreneur. Like what? I don't know what I'm doing. Like I am in over my head because I said I could help him, but he makes so much more money. He has so many more followers. He's done so much bigger shit. Why on earth would he spend an hour at a time to just talk to me of all people? And I realized it's like, he's not coming to me for help on all this other shit. He's coming to me for my insights in my domains of expertise. And it was like, just like you, with that, it's like, they're coming to you for the personal branding aspect. They're not coming to you with like, hey, how do I make an extra $100 million this year? Well, you're not the guy for that. Right. And it's like, so like I walked away from us working together, one, with a friend now, lifelong friend, that's been great. But also like with that sense of, it's okay if I can't do all of the things, as long as I focus on what I'm really great at and helping people with that, that's why people come to me. And I think that's just, that's a really interesting sort of dynamic with, say yes and then figure it out. Like Rochelle, she has on her whiteboard, she's drawn a duck and she just says, be a duck. Like, say yes, be calm on the surface, and then panic underneath. That's completely okay. And that's how you can go through life, right? How does that come up in your life of saying yes, being calm on the surface, but then internally being like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just going to figure it out.
Yeah, it's really come up a lot with this new program we've launched, this Lifestyle Business Academy, where it kind of stemmed from the headline. So the headline for this thing is build $100,000 a year lifestyle business in under 12 months, guaranteed. And when I came up with that headline, I was like, oh, that's good. That's like, I can feel that there's power in that headline. $100,000 a year business in under 12 months, guaranteed. Okay, nice. And then I was like, okay, but like, how the hell do we deliver on that? And I spent ages, I spent like a week thinking about it. I was like, I actually think we can deliver on this, because if I really think about it, like, it actually is a step-by-step process. There's a system behind it, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, there's all these caveats and all these like, things. And, obviously we can't do the work for the clients, like students, they have to do it themselves, et cetera, et cetera. But I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just give it a go. Worst case scenario, we just give people their money back. And so we basically put out an offer to our audience with that headline, and a bunch of people signed up. And now we're 100 students into the program, and people are having a good time, and a bunch of people are getting results. A bunch of people are not getting results, but like, it's been an interesting exercise in, let's just give it a go and see what happens. And it's really felt like a paddling beneath the surface type situation. Like, over the Christmas holidays for the last like 2 weeks, the team's been off, but like every single day I've been grinding away on this desk for like 8 hours a day during the holidays, redesigning the curriculum based on the feedback from the first 2 cohorts, and looking through every single student's like workbooks and stuff, and figuring out like, okay, where are they getting stuck? Looking at the successful students, stalking their LinkedIn profiles to see what are they doing right, using that to edit the course material and all of that sort of stuff. And I kind of had the thought that this is actually it's quite a lot of work to be doing. And I would be surprised if I would be surprised if someone like me was doing that amount of work on their program. Like if James Clear were to launch I don't know, Atomic Habits Academy or some shit like that, and he was grinding away for 2 weeks during his Christmas holidays when it's supposed to be the holidays, because he's like just trying to make it really good based on feedback, I'd be surprised. I'd be like, oh, you really don't need to do that. But at the same time, it really felt like that duck thing of like, no, like we've made this big promise and there's stuff to do. And so it's time to get to work and do the stuff. And it was actually weirdly fun. It was quite exhilarating having this like big product to work on, where the promise is quite like big, and I have to rise to the challenge of creating the materials and the curriculum and the program design and everything to meet that challenge. And that's quite nice. Like I haven't had that feeling in a while, because productivity stuff I've been doing for 9 years, and we don't really make like big promises or big claims out of that. But with the business stuff, that's a pretty big promise to live up to. And so it was quite a lot of work, but it was also really fun. Like, it's one of those things I think that, and you and I have talked about this as well, where it's like, it's quite nice having an ambitious goal to work towards. And I've noticed in my life, when I don't have a sufficiently ambitious goal to work towards, I start to feel a bit like demotivated. Like, what's the point? I'm just like showing up and just another YouTube video, all of this sort of stuff. But as soon as there's like an interesting project that like will make something of me, or I'll learn something in the process of like building towards the thing, whether it's like software or this like new like online business school type thing, then it feels like, oh no, we're here to build. And this feeling of like, we're here to build is sort of like the feeling I had back when I was making websites as a teenager, or when I was building my first business, like the software to help kids get into med school and stuff. And it was like, it doesn't feel like work. I'm working until midnight, and I love it because it's super fun. And it's like that feeling of like, whoa, this is great. That's the feeling that I have when trying to work towards those like bigger outcomes. I think maybe one thing interesting about this is the way that we teach this whole like starting a business thing is we encourage people to figure out their niche, i.e. who's the group of people you're going to help and what's the problem you're going to help them with. And then once you figure that out, when it comes to creating your offer, what you need is a compelling promise. And a compelling promise is 10 words or less that describes what you do, but in a way that is intriguing enough for someone to want to find out more. So something like, I help anyone build a $100,000 a year business in under 12 months guaranteed. That's pretty good. It's pretty intriguing. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Now, we have a lot of students who will make more diluted promises based on their existing skill set. So I want to help you overcome imposter syndrome. It's like, okay, fair enough. But it would be a stronger promise and a clearer promise if it was like, I help you overcome imposter syndrome so that you can get a raise at work. Because that's why a lot of their audience want to overcome imposter syndrome, because they fundamentally want a raise. But then the students would feel like, oh no, but I can't promise the raise because that's outside of my control. And oh no, my skill set is in this very specific domain. Or I could make this promise, but it requires 3 or 4 steps. And maybe I only know how to do 1 or 2 of them. So I don't have the skills for steps 3 and 4. And to me, the default response is, I don't have the skills for steps 3 and 4 yet, but I can figure it out. But for a lot of our students who are beginner entrepreneurs, they'll just say, I don't have the skills for steps 3 and 4, so I can't do it. And so what I've been trying to talk people into doing and sort of coaching them through the process is, it is actually better for your business if you make a promise that is more intriguing. Because if you dilute the promise purely based on the skills you already have, unless those skills are already super high income and high in demand and solve a very painful thing for the customer, you're probably not gonna make that much money. But if you can use those skills as the base, do some more work to learn more skills and figure out the system, such that you're actually able to solve a more painful problem for the business or for the customer that you're serving, that's the thing that helps you build a big business. And so this is where the imposter syndrome really comes in, because these guys that genuinely do not have the skills yet to be able to solve the big problem. But what I'm encouraging them to do is, I would rather you solve a big problem and learn the skills than you solve a smaller problem purely based on the skills you already have and just not get anywhere with it because it's too small a problem for someone to pay for.
One of the reframes I had heard was, rather than say, I don't know how to do that, say, I'm learning how to do that.
Nice.
And that completely shifts your perspective on that issue. So I really like all that you're saying. So you really like doing the Lifestyle Business Academy. How long did you want to do it before you gave yourself permission to do it?
Probably about a year, maybe longer than that. I was having a coaching session with one of my other mentors, Ollie Richards, literally a year ago. And I remember, we were trying to figure out what are my goals for 2025? This was last year. And he was asking me a bunch of questions. And one of the things I said was, I really want to have my own online business school. I think that would be really fun. And he was like, that's interesting. And we sort of explored that a little bit more. And I was like, yeah, I just think the traditional MBA system, it's I know people who've done MBAs, they don't really learn anything that's that useful. There's all these people that want to start businesses. I'd love to build an alternative MBA. And I was like, oh shit, that name's taken by Seth Godin. But I'd love to build an alternative MBA for solopreneur lifestyle business owners who just want to make 6 figures or something like that. And then I sort of second guessed myself, be like, no, there's too many other things going on, et cetera, et cetera. And I gave myself permission to run a test for this 6 months later, where I was we ran this 1K challenge over the course of 6 weeks. The challenge was around make your first $1,000 online. And what I was really testing for there was 2 things. Number 1 is the audience interested? And number 2, do I find this fun and interesting? And the audience was interested, and I did find it fun and interesting. So then I was like, okay, cool. That feels like it's validated after 6 months of thinking about this. That's really given me permission to lean into this online business school type vision. And when I started talking about it out loud and doing the sort of fake landing pages and stuff just to see what it looks like and making pitch decks and stuff for the team, I started to feel good about it. I was like, oh, there's this compelling vision of an online business school, an alternative to an MBA that helps you build a lifestyle business. Just even that soundbite as a vision just feels interesting. It feels compelling to pull me towards it. And over time, I've gotten the knack for trying to find that sort of feeling of oh, I think there's something here. I think this could be fun. Because then the motivation happens completely effortlessly. Whereas when I don't have that thing of oh, this could be fun, or like, and it's instead yeah, we should probably do this because it's good for the business. Then it feels like the motivation is like, coming up in drips and drabs, and I have to rely on discipline and all of that kind of stuff. But it was probably a few years of percolating in the back of my mind, to the point I was able to say it to Ollie to be like, I want to build an online business school. and I remember feeling weird about it when I said I want to build an online business school, because all the thoughts were there like, no, but like, I don't have any qualifications. I've not done an MBA. Maybe I should do an MBA first, and then I'll have the credibility to build an online business school, and all of that kind of stuff. I think over time I've gotten used to ignoring those voices in my head and just like going for it anyway. And even then, it still took me 6 months of thinking about it to even like launch the test product in the first place. So, bit of a journey there.
Well, so again, I look back at our notes, and one of the things that we talked a lot about was like core value and alignment and things like that. And one of the things that you had said was that freedom was like a main driver or a core value for you, but specifically the freedom to teach people how to live their best lives. That was like a recurring theme. Dude, this seems like such a natural downstream of this, right? Because what does it mean to help people live their best life? Teaching them how to build a business of themselves, being themselves, doing, relying on their expertise, whatever, building a business around their ideal lifestyle. And 100K, you're pretty free at 100K, give or take. What actually held you back from making this a reality? Because it seems so aligned. It feels so authentic, so energizing once you put it out into the world, once you say it, once you give yourself permission, once you actually start building it, you're staying up, working 8 hours a day on the holiday. What actually held you back from doing it?
I think it was, I wasn't sure I could add enough value, basically. The thought process was, yeah, but it's been years since I've done the 0 to 100K journey. And I did the 0 to 100K journey back in like 2013, where I was like, the internet was different, times are different. I found an audience, not through social media, but through this like random forum. Okay, I was selling like cheap things to students. I actually wouldn't recommend selling cheap things to students. That's like actually playing business on hard mode. If I was starting today, I would actually just do a high ticket offer and sell it through sales calls. But but we've actually not done a high ticket offer and sold it through sales calls, right? So like I'd be teaching something that I haven't actually done explicitly because we haven't needed to do that because like I've got my YouTube channel. And yes, it's about content and about building a personal brand, but also like, I got started in 2017 where again, YouTube was very different. So like, right now, actually I probably wouldn't do YouTube. I'd actually do LinkedIn or Instagram, probably LinkedIn if I was starting today, but like, I'm not that good at LinkedIn. I've only got 200,000 followers on LinkedIn. It's like, and my LinkedIn grew as a side effect of my YouTube channel. So really, if I was starting a business today, I would do a high ticket offer around coaching, consulting, or services, one-on-one coaching. I would create content on LinkedIn. I would sell it through discovery calls or sales calls. And 100% of this is stuff that I did not actually do myself, because the thing that I did worked for me back when the meta was different. But it's not what I would recommend. It's sort of a do as I say, not as I do type situation. So then I was like, it feels weird to be teaching something that is not the path explicitly that I followed. And that was the 6 months of percolating that it took me to realize. And part of this was I signed up to like literally $200,000 worth of coaching programs, mentorships, and masterminds from other people who are in that space, consumed all of their content at triple speed while I was on a run, transcribed the shit out of everything using transcription software, got the AI to give me the notes for it, turned it into a notebook LM to ask questions around like, okay, let's look at all of Cole Gordon stuff, all of Taki Moore stuff, all of Alex Hormozy stuff, all of Charlie Morgan stuff, and talk to me about like how they think about like designing offers and stuff, rereading the books and doing all that kind of like prep work, all the book work as it were, to really get a handle on like, okay, the path that I followed is actually not the path that I would recommend. So I need to know what the path is that I would recommend. And once I had enough conviction that like, okay, no, there's something here. And actually, I think I have a better way than these other gurus of like teaching the same topic, or even a slightly different way, or even a slightly clearer way, because I know where students are going to get stuck, because I've been working with students in our YouTuber Academy for 5 years. Okay, I actually think we can simplify offer creation. I think we can simplify the niche thing. I think sales calls are going to put people off, and Cole Gordon sales training is amazing, but like, I think it's going to put people off. I think we need to soften it a little bit. So all of those things started to come about. And it's sort of like Russell Brunson's book, Expert Secrets, kind of talks about this, where it's like, at the start, you start off by being a curator of other people's ideas. By like, every time I do a video about how to make an offer, I reference $100 million offers, obviously, and still do because it's a great book. But as you become more familiar with the space, you start to kind of create your own frameworks. And it was at that point where I found myself creating my own frameworks around what these other gurus were teaching, that I was like, okay, I think there is something here. And then that was the thing that sort of gave me the internal permission to like do the thing. If I were coaching myself, I probably could have pushed myself to do it sooner than that. Probably. But also, I quite like I quite like the diving into a topic and really getting a handle on it and having a clear idea of what I'm going to do before I do the thing. But again, this is not advice I would give to other beginner entrepreneurs. Another to do as I say, not as I do thing, because we do have students in our program that will want to do this research thing for 6 months and never actually talk to a customer. And we've got to push them to be like, guys, okay, let's do the research thing for like 2 weeks, and then let's start talking to customers. And then while we're talking to customers, then we can totally do the reading and learning and stuff. And even with our program, even though I spent like months consuming all this content and learning about it, as soon as we started getting students actually going through the program, suddenly I was like, okay. There's all sorts of stuff that I missed the first time around. So now all of this work needs to be updated. But then it sort of feels like a continuous development process, which is quite fun.
Have you heard of Theorycrafting?
I mean, in World of Warcraft, yeah. But
Okay, yeah. So typically, people only have heard of it from like nerddom. So like WoW, D&D, Magic the Gathering, shit like that. So Theorycrafting, effectively, for people who don't know, is you basically plan out what you're going to do before you do it, right? So like with WoW or D&D, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take this race in this class, and then at level 12, I'm going to take these spells, and I'm going to go over here and get this equipment. And you plan everything out, but you haven't actually played the game yet. You're still planning, you're still researching, you're still thinking, you're still talking about what you're going to do maybe one day somehow. And the issue with Theorycrafting, one, it's kind of driven by this fear of I'm not ready. I need to wait until I feel ready before I do the thing. When the reality is you take action, then you feel ready. You don't feel ready until you take action. But Theorycrafting is so compelling and almost addictive sometimes for people because you get so much of the quote dopamine, I guess, for lack of a better word, of doing the thing without actually risking failure, right? Because when you're Theorycrafting, you are the master strategist. You have all the answers. No matter what happens, you can figure it out. And you just play all these like mock battles and scenarios in your head. And it gives you the illusion of playing the game and winning the game without ever having to risk losing the game. And that's something I think a lot of people get trapped in is endlessly Theorycrafting of, okay, well, let me do all this research on my niche or this, or let me spend the next 3 weeks going through subreddits or talking to Claude or ChatGPT or some shit. Okay, well, let me read one more book. Okay, well, this is totally at the 5-year mark. This is what my business is going to look like. And you've seen like that Disney diagram of like, here's like all the IP of Disney, like the cartoons, the books, also shit. I like that you said we give them like 2 weeks max, right? Like you need like a cutoff of like whatever you find at this point, now you take action. How do you define it for yourself to avoid getting caught up in Theorycrafting?
I mean, I still do get caught up in it because it's quite fun. And similarly, when I was playing World of Warcraft, I spend more time watching videos about World of Warcraft than I do actually playing the game because there's something fun about it. It's nice. You don't have to. There was a real like solidifying experience I had. It was like a year ago, and I was getting back. I got back into World of Warcraft. I was playing a tank character, and I was trying to do Mythic Plus dungeons for the first time. And I watched a bunch of videos about it. And then at one point, like after hours and hours and hours of Theorycrafting, the perfect build and the perfect spec for my paladin, I went into one of these dungeons, and I got absolutely fucking destroyed. And people in the group were flaming me for not knowing what I'm doing. And I had this real sense of like total panic that I was so out of my depth. These mobs were hitting so hard and I had no freaking clue what to do, even though I had watched all the videos and I had the perfect spec that the best paladin in the world was like playing as well and stuff. I just had no fucking clue. And then I got kicked out of the group of that dungeon and I went out and I was like, okay. And then I rewatched hours of content. But just having tried it once And then watching the content was made such a difference where I was like, oh, I get it. I now understand exactly what they mean when they say you should always have one of your cooldowns available. Because I remember not having my cooldown available and just being like, huh, and then getting absolutely destroyed by a single melee hit. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And then I found this random guy with like 12 views on YouTube where he was like, here's how you practice your rotation. You walk into the dungeon solo without a group. You like do the thing, and then you walk out of the dungeon, and you keep on doing that until you can survive for more than 30 seconds without a healer. I was like, oh, interesting. And I would never have come across that video because it was like too practical. And I was looking for the theory stuff. And then I went back into the dungeon, and then I got destroyed again, but it was a bit better. And then I went back out again, did some more Theorycraft. And sort of this kind of feedback loop started to happen. And that feeling of like sheer and utter panic at not knowing what the fuck to do, I was like, that's the feeling that actually makes learning happen, because you're really getting a feel for what's going on. I remember a few years ago, back when I had a real job, when I was working as a doctor, my very first rotation was on cardiology, and I was holding the crash call bleep. So when someone has a cardiac arrest, sort of pager goes off, alerting various doctors around the hospital, and you got to run to the location of the cardiac arrest. And I was like a baby junior doctor, fresh out of med school, never done this before in my life. And I was called to like a cardiac arrest on like day 3 of the job. And I remember that sheer and utter feeling of fucking panic, being like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. I'm so glad I'm not the only one here. I'm just like, because, you know, I did the simulations and stuff in med school. I read the books, I watched the videos, but nothing can prepare you for the actual moment where you got a patient dying in front of you and you're like, holy fuck, what do I do? And that feeling of like, whoa, I feel so out of my depth right now. Then like a month later, we had the option of taking this like advanced life support course, which was like a whole 2 days of workshops on like drilling the simulations on how to respond to a cardiac arrest. And I took this more seriously than anyone else in my cohort did, because I was the guy who had this like panic moment on day 1, being like, fuck, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I prepared so much for this course. I read all the books beforehand. I did all of it, and like I ended up getting like a 96% and getting recommended to be an instructor and shit like in this course, where everyone else was like, oh God, we have to do this course. And I was like, no guys, like I understand the sheer and utter abject panic of not knowing what to do in a cardiac arrest situation. So I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to work on this. And so I was reminded of that moment when I was playing my prop paladin of like, I don't know what's going on. And this is, I think, the feeling that people try and really avoid at all costs. This panic feeling of like, I don't know what's going on. Getting on a sales call for the first time gives you that panic feeling. Doing a coaching session with someone for the first time of like, But it's sort of like, you know, the analogy I use for our students is like when you learn how to ride a bike for the first time. You could spend ages reading how to ride a bike. You could watch videos of the Tour de France. You could have the best gear in the world. You could spend ages theory crafting about how to ride a bike. But until you get on a bike and fall off, there is something about the experience that like your body needs to know what it feels like to get on a bike and fall off. Similarly, if you're skiing, your body needs to know what it's like to ski and fall off. When you're ice skating, you need to know what it's like to hit the ground and realize you're not going to die. Those experiences seep into your body in a way that then makes the knowledge that you gain through theory crafting and learning about the stuff way more applicable. And so kind of this thing around, yes, the learning is great, but also it has to come on a foundation of actually trying the thing and recognizing that it's okay to try the thing and fail at the thing. Because probably the situation you find yourself in your creative business is probably not life and death. So it's okay to try and fail at the thing. And then all of the learning becomes much more applicable. And it's almost like, you know, you put your glasses on and suddenly you can see in 4K rather than in like 240p. You're like, oh, the amount of resolution I now have, having just tried it once or twice, is way higher than I could have ever gotten by just watching the videos about it.
Yeah, because finally you have context and you understand the stakes. Like if you never like actually play, it's like, oh, it's all theoretical, it's all fine, like everything's safe, right? It's also like grad school, right? Or your program where like we're just reading from books, we're talking through simulations, or maybe even doing some mock simulation type shit, but none of it's real. It's okay. And like I remember that for me, like, you know, going through, you know, being with clinical psychology, doing therapy and shit, it was completely different when I had like a real patient in front of me and I had to like assess for like suicidality or something. It's like, if I miss a symptom, this person could fucking die. And then like, I went back to my mentor, my supervisor was like, hey, how the fuck do I get better at this? Because this is real shit. This isn't like classroom shit anymore. Like I gotta be on top of my shit. And like, for me, that shift happened when I went from like general psychology to clinical specifically, because clinical is like, it's practical, like actually doing therapy and shit. That was a shift for me of like, I'm going to be working with real people with real problems. I got to get real good at my job real fucking quick. But it's the same thing in business, right? Like you can read all the business books you want. And honestly, that's what most people do. Most people, they read the books, they listen to the podcasts, they watch the videos, but they don't do anything. They just sit there like, oh yeah, you know, in 3 years I'll do this, or once I make this much money or I save up this much, then I'll do that. And they map it all out, but they never actually do it. Because the reality is, when you take that action, suddenly you feel vulnerable. Suddenly you can fail. Suddenly this precious idea you had just gets eviscerated by reality.
Yeah, 100%. That's part of the fun though.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, like, you know, we talked earlier about, like, that's why so much of this shit is psychological, because it isn't that you don't know the tactics necessarily, because honestly, either you already know them or you can learn them if you need, right? Like you can figure it out. It's more so like, how do you deal with the emotional aspect, the psychological aspect of feeling that failure, or feeling like, oh, I bombed that discovery call, or, oh, I put this offer out and nobody wanted it. How do you think about that today versus when you were first starting out with your creator lifestyle business?
I think when I was starting out, I didn't really think about it. The concept of it was all so new that I didn't have. I think this was it. Back in 2017, I didn't have any expectations or any targets or any goals as such. Firstly, because I was careful to avoid setting goals that were outside of my control. Because I knew that, like, hey, if I just set the input goal of, like, or the output goal of, I'm just going to do a video a week for 2 years and see what happens, I know for myself that that is actually a better way of operating than, my goal is to hit 100,000 subscribers. How do I reverse engineer that? But also, there were a lot less people on YouTube back then doing videos about how much money they make as YouTubers. So it was only when Graham and Stefan started doing that, like a few years later, that I started to be inspired. I was like, holy shit, this guy makes $2,000 a day from bloody AdSense. That's how much I make in a month working as a doctor, 60 hours a week. What the fuck? You know, all of that stuff. So I think deliberately, because I had very modest goals of like, hey, I'm just going to do it and find out. And I didn't have a target to shoot towards that I was sort of trying to reverse engineer. That made it actually quite easy. Nowadays, it's in many ways harder because now we have targets, because like we spend $2 million a year on like team salaries and shit. So like, got to make at least $2 million a year to like even break even. And I want to make some profit because, you know, I've got lifestyle costs, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, we kind of need to make 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, you know, all of that stuff. And so now there are targets. Now it's like, well, if we don't make at least 500,000 from this launch, it was kind of not even worth doing. And so then it's a bit more like, oh, okay, like we should probably think a little harder about this. I think this is one of the things where when you're starting out an entrepreneurial journey, the mindset really should be move fast and break things. Just like do stuff imperfectly, just give it a go. As the business starts to become bigger, the leverage on an individual decision is so much bigger. So it's like, well, we could work on this for 3 months and launch the thing. But if any of our assumptions don't hold true, then that's kind of potentially wasted 3 months of effort. And then we scrap the project, and then it demotivates the team because we scrapped the project. So we really should get some data validating whether this is actually a good idea before we actually do it. And so over time, I've learned to be, it's kind of this balancing act between being measured with the decisions that you make as an entrepreneur once you're at a certain scale, and also still having that like startup mentality of move fast and break things as needed. There was a quote I saw from Jeff Bezos where he's like, every day I have a dozen ideas that could kill Amazon. Because it's not, at a certain scale, it's not about coming up with more ideas. It's about drip feeding new ideas into the organization at the rate that the organization can handle. Because if I were to come up with like a bunch of new ideas and just throw them at the team, then the business would actually crumble. And so what I need to do is have the restraint when I'm coming up with a new idea to actually just do the exploration by myself, not talk to the team about it, talk to coaches or mentors or friends about it, but not talk to the team about it because they're actually busy executing on the stuff that we're already doing. And only when it comes to like quarterly planning that we're like, okay, let's now do this as a Q3 thing or as a Q1 thing or as a Q2 thing. So like if the business was still smaller and I had the idea of like, oh, let's do an online business school, I probably would have just done it. But at the scale we're now at, it's like actually waiting 6 months to make sure this is the right thing to do before we do the thing at our scale now is actually quite a sensible thing to do. And this is why even bigger companies operate in like 3-year cycles. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this in 2029. It's like, and it's very easy to look at that and laugh at them and be like, lol, they've lost the agility they once had as a startup. But also they've got thousands of employees. So it's like, it's just a different game that you're playing at that point. But the thing that I would always say for beginner entrepreneurs is when you are small, you have the benefit of not having that many costs. You have the benefit of not having a big team. You have the benefits of, it doesn't really matter if the thing doesn't work because no one gives a fuck. So like actually leaning into that energy and taking advantage of it rather than operating like a big corporation when you're a one-man solopreneur.
Love that. So on the topic of like bouncing back, you've kind of talked about light mode, your keyboard, right? How have you bounced back and sort of like how have you thought through that whole process? Because it was a quote unquote failed product launch, right?
Oh, yeah,
That's
totally.
how you've described it. Yeah. Walk me through like that internal journey of going through all that and coming out the other side.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, so for context, we spent a couple of years working with an agency to try and build our own mechanical keyboard, like a computer keyboard type thing. And then we released it and it kind of flopped. I kind of felt weird about releasing it, but like all this work had gone into it. And I was like, okay, you know, I was like, fuck it, let's just do it and see what happens kind of thing. It's like, you know, that old approach of like, screw it, we'll just see what happens. And not many people bought it. A professional keyboard reviewer reviewed it and sort of ripped it to shreds because it was terrible, apparently. Apparently, we were pricing it at $150, but it was, you know, comparable keyboards would have only been $100. Not, you know, to mention that the comparable keyboards have massive economies of scale, and we were doing like a relatively small print run of the keyboard, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then I felt weird about like promoting it because I kind of knew in the back of my mind that like this is actually not a competitive keyboard. Like it's not actually better meaningfully than what else is on the market. So I felt weird about promoting it. And so then we've got thousands of these units that we still haven't sold. And so we've ended up writing off about $250,000 worth of inventory because we're just probably not going to sell it. And we're actually like in the process of figuring out what do we do with all these keyboards? How do we give them away to people for free? Can we list them on Amazon for like cost price and just recoup some of the losses? But also, it's like any amount of time we spend thinking about this failed keyboard business is time that could have been spent actually figuring out other ways to grow the business. And so it's almost like if you lose money on the roulette wheel, you don't try and recoup your money on the roulette wheel. Like that would generally be dumb. So like, I don't really think about the keyboards, to be honest, until they come up in a team meeting once in a while. I'm just like, yeah, it was a £250,000 loss experiment. Yeah, you win some, you lose some. It's fine. You know, that kind of approach.
I love that roulette metaphor though, of like, if you start to lose money, don't keep betting on shit that clearly isn't working. Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Seth Godin before. One of the things he said is he really likes chocolate, like chocolate bars and things. And at one point he had considered like spinning up his own chocolate brand. And he was like, but then I realized this chocolate bar that I really, really love already does it better than I could. I would rather just recommend this chocolate bar than try to make my own that wouldn't be as good. And I think just like as an entrepreneur, like that's such a hard thing to like accept, is like, I might want to do this, but could the thing I create be better or different in a better way than what my favorite thing is right now?
Yeah, 100%. Like with the same light mode brand, we were working on a backpack. So, you know, I carry a backpack every day. I've tested out all the backpacks on the market. I've landed on the Peak Design Everyday Carry 30-liter backpack V2. It's so good. And there was just no way we could come close to making it that good. Because they specialize in that shit. They've been doing it for like years. It's really good shit. And after seeing samples back and forth from the factory in China like 5 or 6 times, and also the fiasco of the keyboard brand, I was like, you know what? Fuck the backpacks. Like, we cannot do a better job than Peak Design. Maybe we could partner with Peak Design and be like, hey guys, can you do like a white version as like an Abdaal collab? We talked to Nomadic about this a little bit, realized that it just doesn't make sense in terms of like, you know, 8% royalties on the cost of a bag. It's just quite a lot of effort, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, if we can't do it better ourselves, could we partner with them to do like a collab version? That could be kind of fun. Like we're partnering with Baron Fig to do a pen just because why not? It's just kind of fun. But I kind of view these as like side hustles, side quests in the game of entrepreneurship that I know won't really have a return, but it's just kind of cool to have physical products. So yeah. So far with the backpacks, we do not have any kind of Olive Bell specific backpacks, and I've been using the same one for the last like 4 years. But it's so good, and I love it, and I recommend it to everyone, so it's fine.
On that topic of, kind of what is worth your time and energy and things. So I'm a big fan of the Stoic concept of memento mori, right? Remember death, remember you will die. And just using your mortality as a motivator to live fully. What is most worth my time? There is a quote I really love. It's Kevin Kelly, but he's like quoting one of his friends, and his friend is like 65. And he says, 5 years is what any project worth doing will take. From the moment of inception to the last good riddance, a book, a campaign, a job, startup, whatever, will take 5 years to play through. So he asks himself, how many 5 years do I have left? He can count them on one hand, even if he's lucky. So this clarifies his choices. If he has less than 5 big things he can do, what will they be? So if we assume average life expectancy is around 80, how many 5-year like life units do you have left?
So I've probably got like 9, somewhere between 9 and 10.
So that is 9 or 10, best case scenario, of things you can properly build out. How does that shape your perception of what is worth doing in this next chapter?
That's a good question. I like that. I like that way of thinking about it. The number I always have in my mind is 7 years. I think I got 7 years from Derek Sivers back in his sort of like 7-year careers and stuff. And I like the number 7 because it's a bit more conservative. I did med school for 8 years. I was in high school for like 7 years. I started doing YouTube about 8 years ago, and sort of I feel like my productivity arc was like, actually my med school admissions business was 2012 to 2019, 7 years. So I've seen this number 7 come up in my life quite a lot. And so I do think about this like, it's even less.
Units.
so I think about it in the sense of, with this like online business school, the question I asked myself was like, can I see myself doing this for a decade? And my answer was like, oh, hell yeah. And this was like the first thing I've had in a while, like this and software, where I'm like, I can see myself doing this for a decade. We're about to launch a new productivity app that we're trying to build to make it big. And I can totally see myself doing that for the next decade. And so that's sort of like my barometer for making decisions around things. Do I actually want to do this for the next decade? It's probably not the advice I would give if I was just starting out, because that's like, oh shit, do I have to commit to a single business idea for a whole decade? But I don't know if it's going to work, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just like, can I commit to building my lifestyle business, whatever format that looks like? It's going to require pivots, but can I commit to that for 10 years? If someone's starting a YouTube channel, one thing MKBHD said, he was interviewed on Y Combinator about like, what's the secret to your success? And he said that like, well, to be honest, when you do anything for 10 years, chances are it's going to work. And I heard this a few years ago, and I really kind of, that almost became like my North Star philosophy for YouTube of like, oh, I've just got to do this for 10 years. And of course it's going to work. And so now I'm like 8 and a bit years into my YouTube journey. I still haven't hit the 10-year mark. So it's like, we're still in the early game. So I like thinking in those kind of time horizons when it comes to figuring out what to work on.
Love it. Speaking of like your YouTube, you have a couple like side channels, and one is a podcast with your brother. And one I think is great. It's super candid, like very just like real conversation, not like, a presentation or trying to be like overly edited. And in a recent sort of catch up episode you all did, you talked about currently one of your biggest goals / struggles is feeling your feels, like how to feel your feelings. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So this is the thing that I realized probably a couple of years ago, where I realized that I don't feel my feelings to the extent that other people seem to. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of like, I guess my emotional range is quite low. Like I generally am sort of operating on a general baseline of tranquility. Don't really seem to feel high highs in the way that some people do. Don't really feel low lows in the way that some people do. But even to the point where, my then girlfriend, now wife, would like, we'd be talking about something, and she'd be like, "Oh, your face is twitching right now, and it seems like you're about to cry. What's going on?" I'll be like, "Really? Oh," because I actually couldn't feel that. But like someone else could see it on my face that like this thing has triggered me or affected me in some way. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. So I looked into this, and it turns out it's a thing that, in particular, dudes really struggle with, around sort of being cut off from the neck down, where it's like you're so in your head that like actually figuring out what is my body actually feeling is just like sort of floats underneath the surface of consciousness to the point that you're not really aware of it. And so I did a bunch of things to try and work on this. So I saw a therapist who specializes in this for like 2 months. I did some sessions with Dr. K from Healthy Gamer GG. He's great. I did an ayahuasca thing when I was in Colorado a couple of years ago. And this sort of got me into the Joe Hudson stuff. I went to his like Groundbreakers retreat, which is quite a lot about feeling your feelings and stuff. And so over time, I've just sort of been exploring this world of like emotions and, you know, how to get a bit more in touch with my feelings. You know, at the same time, feelings are not facts. Feelings are merely a signal. In the same way that thoughts are not facts, they're merely a signal. So I don't want to like overcorrect on this front and suddenly start like every time I'm feeling anything, but suddenly take it super, super seriously. But it's just kind of nice to have this little project to work towards, which is sort of trying to increase my range of feeling the human experience. And I've definitely gotten better at that over the last like couple of years.
Yeah, so it's, I think in psychology we call it normative male alexithymia. Sounds super clinical.
It's a thing. Nice.
Yeah. It's basically just like undercase S stoic, like you're stoic.
Yes.
You're kind of like blunt. You have like a compressor on your emotions. Yeah, normative male alexithymia.
Nice.
So have you gone through ultra speaking with like Tristan and Michael and things or no? Okay. So I went through their creator cohort, and one of the exercises, I forget what it's called, but basically they throw out like a number, and whatever the number is the level of like emotional intensity you have to like add to what you're saying. So like 0 to 10. So 0 is super flat, 0 emotion, 10, like the most emotion you can give. And it isn't just loud, it's just emotionality. And like, so you'll be talking about a topic, and then it'll be like 2, 7, 1, 3, and they just go back and forth. And I remember when I did it with Tristan, he was like, all right, 7. And I would go through it. He was like, all right, 10. And I would go through it. He was like, the highest you went was 7. I was like, motherfucker, what you're saying is a 7 is my 10. Like, I can't go that high. And he was like, I love Tristan. He was like, it seems like you've learned to blunt your emotions throughout your entire life so that now you can't even access these emotional highs and lows. And I looked at him, I was like, well, fuck you, buddy. That's true. But how dare you turn this into a therapy session? So like, I fully get that, right? You know, I think that's one reason why a lot of dudes especially tend to, in entrepreneurship, tend to gravitate towards stoicism, because it kind of like justifies a lot of that.
Yeah.
But also, there's this other term I've heard called gray rocking. And it's basically typically a reaction to someone else in your environment being overly emotional. So you compensate by basically like overly regulating yourself because they're too emotional. So you have to be the anchor, the emotional anchor of the room by gray rocking, by being like that rock, that anchor. And I definitely like identify with that. Like as soon as I heard that term, I was like, holy shit, that's what I do. Right. And like, not that I'm big on like early childhood experiences and shit. I'm not that kind of psychologist, but like, you know, I went through like domestic violence and like in some abuse that way and shit. And just, you know, my upbringing was a little different with some other things. So and like growing up with, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I don't hang my identity on it, but I meet a lot of the markers. And just this whole idea of I'm a big kid, I can be impulsive and hyperactive, and I've seen violence. I learned that if I let my emotions run wild, shit gets broken, people get hurt, I say something or do something I regret later, I'm too rough or something. So just over time, I learned, well, in order for me to like fit in the world, you know, I kind of see myself as a bull in a china shop. So I have to gray rock. I have to blunt my emotions. I have to learn to trust logic and reason, because historically emotionality was more of a liability. And in my own journey, you know, over the last couple of years, you know, I'm 37 right now. So like getting into the, you know, I'm approaching middle age, I guess, based on life expectancy. And as you tend to get older, you tend to move more toward like introspection and like, what is the legacy I want to leave behind, you know, spirituality, like inner shit, and trying to understand where does this come from in me. but also what kind of life do I want to live? And where I'm at right now is learning not necessarily to express my emotions more, but to be more present with them. And then I get to choose how they come out. How do you think about it right now?
I'm not sure. I think my current approach to it is if I'm feeling some kind of emotion, to almost treat it as like a bit of a video game where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What would it look like to try and like amplify the feeling of this emotion and like really focus on it? Which is just kind of interesting because I think I'm still in the phase of like playing around with this, be like, oh, I wonder what, explore, I'm feeling a feeling of anger. I think it's anger. Like, what would happen if I actually just focused on it? Which is sort of anti-stoicism. Stoicism is like you feel a feeling. It's like the story you tell yourself about the feeling, and like change the story, and so that has gotten so natural for me over the years that like anytime I feel anything resembling a negative emotion, immediately like the cognitive reframing is happening around how, oh, I don't really feel bad because blah, blah, blah. And actually, there's a couple of episodes of my podcast with my brother where I would find it difficult to admit that I was feeling bad about something. We had an episode where I was like reading mean comments out loud, and he was like, dude, it clearly looks like you're on the verge of tears. And I was like, well, I might be feeling a modicum of something, maybe, I don't know, I'm not a fucking wetter. I'm not going to feel bad about this stuff. So now I find it easier to admit that I'm feeling bad about this stuff, because I think the stoicism was almost too much. I like overdosed on stoicism to the point where I was just like, obviously I control my own experience. But then again, I have friends who are more on the kind of emotionally volatile end of the spectrum who really feel their feelings. And I was talking to one of them, and he was like, bro, I wish I could do what you did, because that's a superpower. It's a superpower to not be buffeted by the emotions of life and actually just being able to do the thing. Because this guy is like, yeah, every time he feels something, it like just takes over. And so I think there's like a middle way, as with all things. And right now I'm still on the stoic with a small s end of the spectrum. So I'm trying to explore the feelings a little bit and trying to understand what it feels like to luxuriate in the feeling of like sadness or anger or boredom or whatever the thing might be.
Yeah, see, I don't go that far. So this is part of my question. Like, I do think that there are schools of thought of like, you should luxuriate, you should amplify it so that you can fully feel it. I understand that. That doesn't resonate with me personally. I see it more so, you said middle way. I see it almost as like a Buddhist practice, like mindfulness of let me bring my full awareness to this, not necessarily to amplify it, but to give it the space it's trying to take up, in so much as I can ask myself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Because emotions are data. I want to make data-driven decisions. So I'm not going to let the emotion dictate, but it can inform. So it's like, well, I'm suddenly feeling resentment. Okay, why? Why is this resentment coming up? Let me look at this resentment, not just like shove it away or bottle up. Like, okay, why am I feeling resentment right now? What's going on? Is it something in my environment? Is it a thought I just had? Did something happen that is like making me feel insecure, and then I'm feeling like ashamed because I'm insecure, so now I'm resentful? Like, where is this fucking chain at? Let me like look at it. That, rather than amplifying it, or again, like, luxuriating, or it's like, oh, I'm going to be sad today, let me put on a sad movie and just like maximize my sadness. That isn't the approach for me. Because I'm also, man, like, I'm the kind of person, like, I fucking hate crying. Like, I straight up, like, even like, I don't even like crying when it's a good thing. Like when Rochelle and I got married and I was like reading out like my own like wedding vows, like I started to cry, and in my head I'm like, don't be a bitch. Like, why the fuck are you crying? You're crying in front of people. And I'm like, okay, but this is like one of the few times you're allowed to cry. And I'm just like, don't fucking cry. And it's like, let alone when I'm like sad on some shit. And it's like with every fiber of my being, I'm like, just clench. You can't cry. And again, I say that as a psychologist who has told many, many people it's okay to cry. And I thought it's not whatever. But I have learned that logic is not, we can't all be Vulcans. And even Vulcans, right? Like actual like Star Trek shit, Vulcans are like, we actually feel very deep emotions to the point that we get overrun by them, which is why we try to like regulate, right? They go overboard. But yeah, I'm coming to the whole thing of like, emotions are okay within due bounds. But related to that, what is your perspective on this shift we seem to be seeing, and almost like it's like a post-productivity shift toward woo and Laura, she's talking about like, where are you on the woo spectrum? Joe Hudson, he's much more on like emotions and things, not necessarily woo, but like on more emotions. And some other people, we're seeing more and more people who previously were all about stoicism, optimization, productivity, moving more toward ayahuasca, spirituality, other like woo somatic based practices. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, my theory is that when you're into the optimization stuff, and you end up becoming quote successful, and you realize that that does not actually bring the peace, lasting peace, happiness, and fulfillment that you thought it would, and then it's like, well, maybe if I had more money, that it would do the thing. But then either you work on getting more of the success badges and still realize that that's not the thing, or increasingly you listen to podcasts where rich people and successful people have been interviewed who also all say it's not the thing. And so I know this is the case for me, where sort of I've reached a certain level of success and I'm like, I still don't really feel much differently than when I did when I had like 5,000 subscribers. I still feel this sense of like, I need to achieve more and there's more to be done. And I'm like, wait a minute, this actually seems like the concept of dukkha, or unsatisfactoriness, or like suffering. Suffering is the wrong word, but unsatisfactoriness. I do feel this like broad background chronic sense of unsatisfactoriness, that like whenever I'm doing something, there's always a sense of like, yeah, but there's more I could be doing. Interesting. And I've heard enough people in these podcasts saying that this is like a thing, and that like it's not going to go away by like achieving more stuff. And actually the inner work is the thing. So maybe there's something there. Let's optimize my inner world so that I can like, there's almost this new like video game, like a new quest in the video game that's just that's unlocked of like, can I actually do these practices to change my internal experience of stuff, so that I can feel more happiness, peace, fulfillment outside of like the accolades of the external world and stuff. So at least that's the journey that I've gone on. That's a journey for a lot of people that I know. One of my friends, he went on that journey because someone close to him died, and he started to feel all these emotions that he'd like never felt before. And so then he went on the journey of the spirituality / inner woo stuff to explore like, what are all these feelings that I've never had access to. For me, it was more like a cognitive thing around like, there's definitely something here. Because a lot of people I know and trust their views on say that there's something here, like meditation, for example. So I was like, I should probably just give it a go just to see what all the fuss is about. And then when I did ayahuasca for the first time, and that was when I was like, okay, I see what all the fuss is about. And now I kind of understand a little bit more about why meditation is a good thing, having done the ayahuasca thing. So it's, that kind of stuff. But in many ways, maybe this is another trap. Maybe this is the trap of like the optimizer within me and within us has found a new thing to optimize. I don't know, but I'm here for it regardless.
It's like, I have to be the best meditator.
Of course, yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is from Blaise Pascal, and he says, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've heard that quote a lot, and I've always been I've never quite gotten it. Like, really, is that what all humanity's problems stem from? I don't know. I don't think I have anything interesting to say on that front. I also very rarely sit in a quiet room alone. I always feel like, I don't know if you get this, but I always feel the need to be doing something rather than merely just sitting there. Like, even if I'm just sitting there, I'll think, oh, this is a good chance to meditate, i.e. to try and focus awareness on awareness itself and see if I can like get the freaking insight that leads to enlightenment or something like that. Like, there's always something to do. And I was talking to friend and mentor Dr. K about this, and he was like, yeah, the thing with meditation is that like it's gonna sound, he sent me a long email about this, basically being like, it's gonna sound weird, but like in trying to do anything at all, and in trying to even asking the question of like, am I doing it right, you're kind of missing the point. And so the trick is to not to do rather than to do. It's like I've read that kind of thing enough in spiritual books as well to like know that that's like a thing, but like I've never actually experienced that feeling of like just non-doing rather than doing. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah, that's getting into like Zen shit, right? Like, I remember when I had a Buddhism 101 class, my professor, he was like, squirrels are Zen because squirrels don't try to be anything but what they are. They don't think about how do I be a better squirrel or how do I be a dog. They're just squirrels. And, me at 18, I'm like, well, that's fucking stupid. Doesn't make any sense. And, that's sort of the paradox of Zen is, it's kind of like Tao. It's like, if you can explain it, then you're not explaining it. But for me, man, it's not necessarily all of humanities, like from the quote, so much as, are you able to sit alone in a room by yourself with your own thoughts? Because the majority of people spend their entire waking hours distracting themselves from themselves. And but it's almost like a serial killer in like a horror movie. It's like, they're not fast, but they're always right behind you. No matter how fast you run, like as soon as you look back, they're right there, just slowly, coming up. And that's how it is. And I'm not saying this is for you, but for a lot of people, especially like high achievers, it's just like this angst of, I'm not doing enough. If I slow down, then I'm wasting my potential. I'm wasting my time. Rest is a reward and I haven't earned it enough, or my self-worth is attached to my sense of usefulness. So if I'm not doing anything, I'm not being useful, which means I'm useless and I have no worth. There's all this like just fucked up narrative shit that it's like, or it's just, you have some insecurity, right? One of the most common things I talk to with people is like actually fear of success. And it's like, why would I be afraid to achieve the thing I claim to want? Like, why would I be afraid of success? And for a lot of people, success represents loss. It represents losing either their identity, the only identity they've ever known. It represents losing their superpowers, right? So like one person, a couple founders I worked with, they're like, I've been the underdog my entire life. If I succeed, I'm not the underdog anymore. And that will mean I will lose my superpower. If I'm not the underdog, who am I? Or it might represent losing your current friends or your current connections and things. Or it like so much. It so often represents loss to some degree, loss of what you are familiar with. So then people self-sabotage. But part of that is, it's like, I'm afraid that I am unworthy of success. I'm afraid that if I succeed, I will lose all of this. So let me just focus on working so that I don't have to like face these insecurities I have. And then obviously there's other fears. I talk about the 4 horsemen of fear and shit, but just this idea of one of the founders I worked with, he was like, I want to be a better leader so I can scale my company. And then I was like, okay, well, what makes you a shitty leader? Well, I don't delegate. Why don't you delegate? I don't trust people. Why don't you trust people? I don't trust myself. Why don't you trust yourself? Because I feel deep down I'm a broken piece of shit who is unlovable and unworthy. So I've spent my entire life trying to prove other people wrong. When was the last time you sat by yourself with your own thoughts? Oh man, never. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, I am doing something else because I can't fucking handle being in my own head. And like, dude, that's such a common thing for again, like really successful people, and it's such a mind fuck, right? How do you, or even whether in your own life or just in general with what you know about other people, how do you see that of people avoiding themselves and their own thoughts and insecurities?
I don't know. I was like, what I was thinking is like that thing that you described doesn't really resonate with me, in that I don't think that's my experience. I certainly know people who have that kind of thought pattern where it's sort of like they're so mean to themselves in their own head that they're trying to like avoid that. And I often register surprise when that happens, because I don't think that's my experience of it. But maybe that's just a cope. Maybe that is kind of what's going on with for me under the surface, which is why I always feel the need to be doing stuff. Maybe it's just going on, but just underneath my conscious level of awareness about the thing. So I don't know, but it was interesting as well. Like I went on Joe Hudson's retreat thing, and one of the exercises was to sort of write down what the voice in your head says to you. And I was like, I don't think I have a voice in my head. And then there was like, after a little bit of prodding from Joe, I realized, oh, hang on. Oh, that's what you mean by the voice in my head. Oh, okay, no, I actually do have the voice in my head. And no, it actually is pretty mean to me at times. Or like most of the time. I'm just generally not aware of what it's saying unless I really tune into it. So I don't know. Maybe that's like an underlying thing for me as well, like as to why I always feel the need to be doing stuff. I don't know.
You said you don't typically sit by yourself, but you journal, and I'm assuming you walk and things. You probably listen to podcasts or music or something. What would it look like if you took like 15 to 20 minutes a day by yourself? You can go on a walk, but like no music, no podcast, or like journaling by, like what do you think that could unlock if you did it?
I mean, I kind of do that anyway. Like through journaling, or like I quite enjoy going for a coffee by myself, or like doing a solo date night where I just go to a random restaurant and just like sit by myself. And sometimes I'll have the phone or be reading something, but sometimes I'll be practicing just the art of not doing the thing. I should probably do more of it, because I think like some pretty good creative ideas come out of it. It's like that thing I've been wanting to try for a while. I never make the time for it. Where you leave your phone behind and you just go on a walk for like 10 hours and you just like see what happens. I'm like, I should probably do that at some point. It's just, oh man, the calendar's rammed, and like, it's never a good time. So.
Do you actually have these problems, or do you think you're supposed to have these problems? What I mean is, do you think you actually have a blunted emotional range to the point it's problematic, or is your emotional range actually fine for you?
I think it's totally fine for me. It's just like, it's just like playing a video game, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with my emotional state. In fact, I think it's quite helpful. And at the same time, the fact that there is a game here, the game of like feeling your feelings more, I'm like, oh, that's a fun little game. Similarly, if we stayed at our current level of revenue and profit for the business forever, that's like totally fine. It's more than fine. But there is also a game to be played, a game of like, let's see if we can get to 10 million revenue. Because why not? It's kind of fun. I kind of think, this is my hot take, but I think that a lot of life is finding arbitrary games to play. Video games are literally just that, arbitrary games. I'm playing God of War 2018 on the PS5 these days, playing it on very hard difficulty. Not ultra hard, because that's too hard, but like very hard is like a good level. And it's just an arbitrary level of difficulty, an arbitrary challenge that has no meaning. Similarly, I want, this year I want to get better at like playing guitar and piano and singing and playing by ear and music theory and stuff. Again, totally arbitrary challenge that has no meaning in the grand scheme of things. Similarly, the game of feeling my feelings better, arbitrary challenge, probably doesn't have any meaning in the grand scheme of things. The game of growing business revenue, arbitrary challenge, doesn't have any meaning in the grand scheme of things. But not in a sort of like nihilistic, nothing has any meaning anyway kind of vibe, but more like, this is going to sound woo, but one of my insights from the ayahuasca experience was that like everything is meaningless, and yet every single thing is so meaningful all at the same time. It's like back in the day when I had a real job, I had a very clear thing that I was trying to do, i.e. I was trying to make enough passive income to be able to go part-time in medicine. And then I got there, and I was like, cool, make enough money to be financially free. And then I got there. And it's like, okay, well, we've got another, hopefully 50 years left. What do you do? Well, you come up with arbitrary games to play and just kind of work towards them, enjoy the process, have fun, look after your mind and your body, have a nice relationship, have some kids. Yeah, just sort of generally vibe. I think that's my approach to the emotion stuff, to the spiritual stuff, to the work stuff. And I think that's definitely been a shift over the years, where before I was more attached to like doing it well or doing it right. Now a lot of it feels like just sort of vibing and playing the game that happens to be in front of me. One of which is the emotional state game. But I don't think I approach it in a way of like I'm broken or defective in any way right now. It's more like, yeah, I'm pretty happy with where I am, and also, yeah, let's play the video game.
I love that. Well, that was what I was asking. I was like, you don't come at things from the perspective of starting at a deficit. Like you come at things from the perspective of, I am generally good enough, but this is a curiosity. This is an experiment. This is a learning opportunity, right? Because you're a Ravenclaw, right? Like you identify with Ravenclaw, you love learning, you love like knowledge and accruing skills and things. But that was why I wanted to ask. It's like, because again, like, my own theories in my head, I'm like, I don't think Ali like functions from a state of like a deficit, or like he's missing something. I think he just likes exploring his potential.
Yeah, like I hear this. So Chris Williamson's pod, he kind of talks about kind of this productivity deficit thing, and he had a good episode with Oliver Berkman about it, where it's like you wake up in the morning and you feel like you're operating from a deficit, and as if you do enough things, then you're at like, net neutral by the end of the day. And I'm just like, that's so surprising to me. Like that just doesn't resonate with my experience at all. And people might think that that's my experience because I'm supposed to be the productivity guy, but like my wife has that experience a lot, where she feels like if she's gotten to the end of the day, there's still stuff on the to-do list, therefore she can't turn off because there's still stuff to do. And I'm like, I'm always a bit surprised by that. I'm like, no, I think my experience on this is just like, so what if there's stuff on the to-do list? Like there's always gonna be stuff on the to-do list. Like, it's fine. I don't know, maybe I'm just more zen in that regard. Or maybe I have these thoughts and I'm unaware of them, but either way, it kind of works right now. I feel like genuinely the place I do operate from, is actually this place of like, Brendan Burchard has a saying, strive satisfied. I quite vibe with that. It's like I'm very satisfied. And at the same time, occasionally there's like a new video game to play. So it's like, let's play the video game.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, dude, like for people who don't know, you are basically the same person on and off camera as far as like how you present online, in that you are authentic, you're genuine, you are compassionate. And I remember like when we hung out, when you came through Austin, my wife, Rochelle, she's not like a huge creator or anything. And when we got together, you were like, hey, so how's your PhD program coming? And she looked at me later on. She was like, Ollie remembered I'm getting my PhD. Like she's basically like, I'm a nobody. Like, why did he remember me and my life and this little thing about me? And like, I mean, it made her day that like you remembered that. And dude, you come from such a place of abundance and beneficence and generosity and just true authenticity. I mean, I love that we've been able to build a friendship and things, because I have so much respect for you and everything you do. And that's why, like, I'm always, telling you and like the team is like, hey, anything I can do to help you all succeed and do it, like, I am always right there, because I genuinely want you all to succeed, because the world needs more people like you doing what you do. And it's so nice to see somebody like you saying like, hey, I don't operate, like, I don't wake up thinking I'm behind. Like, I don't wake up at a deficit, because it proves you don't have to wake up believing you're at a deficit. Because dude, and again, like I've worked with people with like 10, 20, $30 million companies, and they're like, I wake up in a deficit. I wake up feeling I have to prove my worth every second of every day. And I have built my empire by flagellating myself, by beating myself and hating myself into success. But now I can't even enjoy my success. And I haven't enjoyed the journey. I haven't enjoyed the destination. Help me do this, right? And then it's, 6 months, 2 years working with somebody. You aren't like that. So much of what you do is kind of fueled by curiosity, right? And you're always investing in yourself. You're like, you don't enter a conversation thinking you know the right answer. You enter a conversation, and like when somebody says something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Or, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, that's a good question. You come to, and you've even done it, today. You come at things from the perspective of, I want to get to the right answer. I do not think I am right, and I'm not going to argue for whatever opinion I come in with. I want to leave better than I entered. I don't enter thinking I know everything, right? And dude, like I love it so much. Like, it's so refreshing. It's so good. It's so just whole and holistic and wholesome. And that's why I wanted to kind of just get your perspective on, is that the reality of you internally? I assumed it was, and that is what I see consistently, but I wanted to make sure.
Firstly, thank you for saying all that. That's very nice. Is that my reality internally? I think for the most part it is. I do, on that final point around not going into the conversation feeling like I have the right answer. That's the thing that I do need to remind myself of some of the time. In particular, if it's a conversation with someone on my team and I'm pretty sure I've got the right answer, it's useful for me to like, have a little humility and actually remind myself to approach it not as if like, I actually have the right answer, but that like, hey, there is an answer that we can get to. I took this, I was at a Tony Robbins event a few years ago, Business Mastery, and one of the things he talks about is, even when you think you have the right answer, keep the right answer in your back pocket and genuinely talk to the team as if you don't know what the answer is, but it's in your back pocket because obviously you've thought about it because you've thought about it, but it's in your back pocket. And it's even better if someone in the team comes up with that same answer, because then they feel so much more buy-in. And so that visualization of like, the answer is in my back pocket. Let's see what other people think. I still have to remind myself of that. I think also in the context of Like, for example, my wife is also a creator and she's been doing it less time than I have. And so if she's having an issue with her YouTube channel or whatever, it is easy for me to default to, yeah, but I've got the answer. Be like, oh, you're facing emotional issue XYZ. Oh man, like I talked to Corey about this 3 years ago. Like I've got the answer, all of that kind of stuff. And I have to fight the urge to not do that. And the thing in my mind is the view thing that Joe Hudson talked about: vulnerability, impartiality, empathy, and wonder. And so when in particular I'm talking to Izzy about like her creator business or whatever, I have to actively remind myself of you: vulnerability, impartiality, empathy, wonder. Impartiality in particular, like I'm not trying to get her anywhere. I'm not trying to get her to the answer that's in my back pocket. And so that for me is more of a challenge in terms of like actually operating in all conversations that way. It's easy enough on a podcast, right? Where we're talking about these things where like genuinely I'm like, I'm actually not sure what my perspective on this is. But if you were to ask me a question that's more like, how do you set goals? I'd be like, okay, I mean, I've got a perspective on that. But if you're asking me about so maybe when I talk to you, it comes across more that I'm more enlightened than I actually am. Because generally the stuff we talk about is not within my wheelhouse of like, I feel I've got the answer. But if you were asking me about tips for growing your YouTube channel, I'd probably be a bit more like, a bit more leaning forward in that sense, rather than trying to just explore what's coming out of you. But I think for the most part, yeah, I don't operate from a place of deficit. And when I find myself doing that, usually the first question I ask myself is, okay, what are the hardware problems? Have I slept? Have I eaten? Have I exercised? Have I had a shower? Have I had a haircut? Sometimes if my hair gets overlong and my beard gets overlong, I start to feel a bit like shaggy and scraggy for some reason. And then I notice that like I'm showing up as a more like scarcity mindset, a bit more like, oh, the business not making enough money. Fuck. And then all it takes is a freaking shower and a shave. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, I feel more put together. That's interesting. Or like if I'm wearing my pajamas and I suddenly just change into like a normal outfit, I'm like, oh, I suddenly feel better. And so over time I've learned that like 90% of the software issues of like deficit or operating from scarcity or like, oh my God, we're gonna run out of money or any of this sort of stuff can actually just be solved by just doing a hardware reset button. And then the remainder of the time, just for the most part, recognizing that like, oh yeah, I'm noticing myself feeling a bit down about the YouTube channel. I'm feeling the need to get more views on the next video. Okay, it's a Tuesday. Yeah, sounds about right. And over time, just recognizing that thought and feeling, it's like, oh yeah, this is just part of the game. That like every single YouTuber I know, even the one with like 20 million, ones with 20 million plus subscribers, often feel like the channel's not good enough and like, the numbers are not as good as they were last quarter or whatever. It's like, it's just part of the game. It's fine. And this thing of like, it's fine, it's just part of the game. Like that kind of attitude, I think, for me over time has really helped in my own journey to kind of continue doing this stuff for like 9 years.
Love it. A couple more questions, then we can wrap up. One of the things that you and I talked about is the concept of like your perfect week. What does your perfect week look like right now? And how much does it differ from your real week?
Nice. I literally have my ideal week calendar on like my Notion calendar thing, which I was making changes to like 2 days ago because like I was setting goals for Q1 of 2026, right? And so whenever I do that, I always like toggle off my main calendar and toggle on my like ideal week calendar. And so, just trying to plan out my life. So what does it look like? Actually, it looks almost identical to my actual calendar. Wednesdays and Thursdays are filming days. I do my Lifestyle Business Academy coaching clinics on like a Monday and a Friday. We have date night every Sunday. Ideally, work finishes by 7:30 p.m. And so dinner and wind down happens. Sometimes that gets encroached on by like, calls with people in the US and stuff like that, which are often in the evening. And I have like a social dinner block on Saturdays where my goal for Q1 is to organize at least one social thing every week. And so that's a thing where I'm like, okay, that's my ideal state, but it's not what's currently happening. What's currently happening is that maybe we do it once every 3 weeks and it's quite like ad hoc and rather than intentional. But actually, for the most part, I found that like living my life based on the perfect week calendar actually just works. And if life gets away from the perfect week calendar, I mean, at this point, I have enough autonomy over my life that I can just kind of literally do what I want. So I'm like, well, either I change the perfect week calendar to reflect this, or I change my existing calendar to reflect what I actually want. And so that exercise of like designing the perfect week, like I've literally been doing it for years now. So I can track like what my perfect week is, how it's evolved over the years, but just going back on the Google Calendar. So thank you for that tip.
Cool. Do you have enough?
It depends on how we semantically define enough, right? For sort of philosophically, spiritually, emotionally, yes. But do I have, let's say, enough money that I can literally never work a day in my life and also sustain like a fancy lifestyle here in Hong Kong? Well, no, I probably need to do some work. Sure. Can I live off the returns on my investment portfolio forever? It's like, well, not quite yet. So it kind of depends on enough, but like, yeah, philosophically, spiritually, when I think about enough, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got more than enough. There's an Instagram reel I saw the other day that was like, bills are paid, wife is hot, kids are cute. What more do you need? And I was like, oh, literally, bills are paid, wife is hot, kids are cute. This is enough.
So in the last 3 years since you and I, worked together, a lot of the things we started off with revolved around how do you align everything with freedom? How do you, develop your business around the freedom to teach and to teach what you want to teach, to help people live their best life, the freedom to have your perfect week, the freedom to enjoy every minute of every day, to remove all the bottlenecks and shit. Between then and now, what's the journey been?
I feel like I've just kind of gotten there. So yeah. Yeah, like over the last 3 years, when we were working together, it was like middle of 2022. I know, yeah, I remember I was living in gas holders in London. We had the office at the time. We had a fairly big-ish team. And I still felt like we were just really making shit up as we went along around, like, our courses thing wasn't yet like stable. The YouTube channel felt like it was always unstable. I was working on the book around then, and that hadn't come out yet. And so I had this sort of thing that was pulling me in this direction. And we had like various team issues of like, yeah, stuff being weird with the team, and I was traveling a lot. And so it was just quite like a bit all over the place. It was still fun. And I look back on that time with fondness. But it always felt like, hey, the perfect week, me living my perfect week is just around the corner. I think actually it's been having a kid that's given me a lot of like stability in life, weirdly, because like I travel a lot less because I've got a kid, and it's a nightmare traveling with a kid. And so it like really has to be worth it to either leave the kid or to travel with the kid. I say kid, she's more like a baby. That means that I'm staying put in like the same place for an extended period of time. We have a domestic helper who also cooks for us. And so like my diet is on point, my gym is on point. I go for a run sort of somewhat regularly when it works. Like the calendar is actually following a pattern, and it's not like I'm saying yes to talking, I got invited to this creator conference in Dubai, which is happening this week. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks. It's just not worth leaving the kid for a few days. I was like, and so the more I've sort of said no to those sorts of things, the more like I feel this sense of like stability and groundedness in what I'm doing. The business feels a lot more stable now. YouTube channel, the YouTube channel is always up and down in terms of the views, but like my approach to it feels more stable. We've got this new project in Lifestyle Business Academy that feels exciting. We've got the software that feels exciting. And so I really think it's just been a journey of, I think Bill Burnett and Dave Evans in their book, Designing Your Life, they call it wayfinding or something like that, where it's like, you don't know what the destination is that you're going for, but you know roughly where it is, and you know the direction you're going in. And so you take a few steps, and then you look at that like North Star, shall we say, or you look at your compass, and you're like, let's do a little bit of a tweak. Take a few more, you go on a bit more, look at the compass, tweak it a little bit more. And for me, things like the Ideal Week calendar is kind of like a North Star, or like, I do these exercises where it's like, write down your own eulogy, write out your obituary, like 40 years from now, you're giving a TED Talk. What's that TED Talk about? And it's like, for the most part, that helps me point the finger at like, where's my North Star in terms of alignment? Then it's just a case of just like sort of making tweaks here and there running experiments to work towards that. For example, a couple of weeks ago, or like 4 weeks ago, I realized, my belly's getting a bit big. You know what? I should probably do something about that. And so I started just tracking my macros every single day. And I've always tried doing that in the past, but I've just never had enough like life stability for it to work, because I'd be traveling all the time, going to restaurants all the time, eating out all the time. But now I'm in the same place for an extended period of time, not traveling for another like 2 months. We've got a chef at home who can cook meals, and I can literally weigh out the chicken breast as I'm eating it. And so the macros have been on point, and so I'm losing weight. I'm like, oh, it's all just happening. Because it's like identifying a thing and then just making a little tweak and not like swinging the pendulum too far in one direction or another. So yeah, it's all just pretty good, man. I love it.
Also, real quick, Ollie and I have talked multiple times during this episode about how I helped coach him. If you are interested in working with me, I'll put a link down below with more information. So if you want help navigating the inner game of entrepreneurship, identifying psychological bottlenecks holding you back from business growth, building a life aligned with your values, and just other ways of pursuing your own definition of freedom, fulfillment, and success, both in life and in business, I'll put more information below. All right, let's get back to the show.
What's next?
I think it's this infinite game idea. Just like continue playing the infinite game, and within the context of that, find more video games to play. Video games meaning like actual video games, and also like metaphorical video games in the sense of, yeah, right now the Lifestyle Business Academy is fun. So that's the next project. Right now we're working on this like productivity software thing. So that's fun. On the social front, I want to, on the hobbies front, I want to get better at the music thing. Cool. That's a new video game. On the social front, I want to organize more like social events here in Hong Kong and build a community of entrepreneurs. Cool. That's a new video game to work towards. And so that's it. Have a couple more kids, figure out the schooling situation, spend summers in London, go on trips with friends occasionally. It's a fairly pedestrian life, to be honest. And yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I don't feel the need to like do stuff for like accolades and achievements and stuff anymore. Once you hit the New York Times bestseller list once for 1 week, you're a New York Times bestselling author for the rest of your life. So like now I no longer have that like badge to aspire towards. And so a lot of it is just a case of, yeah, continue playing the video games, continue enjoying the process, and see what happens.
So would you say you have built a life aligned with freedom?
But yeah, 100%. What's maybe interesting about that is that like my definition of freedom has changed over time. I used to think freedom was freedom from obligations and freedom from commitments. But now that but then I got like maximal amounts of freedom, and then I've cashed in that freedom for like getting married and having a kid. And now with this, for example, Lifestyle Business Academy, I do like 4 live sessions on Zoom every week at the same time. Now, an earlier version of me would have said that that's not freedom, because I've got to be on a Zoom call at like 9 a.m. on a Friday morning to do a coaching clinic. And also at the same time, yeah, it's not freedom in the sense of it's not an empty calendar, but it is freedom in that it is exactly what I want to be doing right now. And if that ever changes, then I will totally change it. But right now, what the state of my calendar is and my life is feels very aligned with, it feels very free and also feels quite grounded, and also feels like I'm committing and investing in the things that matter, like family and kid and like work projects and all of that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Final thing. So I keep like a Post-it of lessons I've learned the hard way that I try to keep as reminders, in that when I tend to struggle in life, it is because I have forgotten these. And when I do well, it is because I've kept them at the forefront. So I keep these as reminders because these are things I'm most likely to forget just because. So for me, it's things like stop overcomplicating it. You're thinking too small. If it was easy, everyone would do it. Live in the arena. What is too obvious to see? And shots on goal. For you, if we replay this 3 to 5 years in the future and you're watching it, this small little clip, what are the things that you are most likely to forget that would have the highest return on quality of life if you remembered them?
Good question. Let's see. One of them would be, don't take it so seriously. One would be, things are probably going to be fine, don't worry about it. One would be, make compounding investments in health and relationships. Another one would be something like, make sure you're always learning, because that has a tendency to fall by the wayside, especially when stuff gets busy. One of them would be something like sort of like Parkinson's law applied to work. Like work will always fill the gaps in the calendar. So block out non-work things intentionally. I think that's the list of things that I'm most at risk of forgetting moving forward.
Love it. Is there anything else you would like to talk about that I didn't ask about, or questions you have for me?
You've known me reasonably well over the last few years, and we worked together with you as my coach. If you had to identify, I don't know, like any kind of blind spots that I might have, or like, I don't know, psychoanalyze me in any way, or like, you know, that kind of thing, what would you say is something that I might want to pay attention to?
Blind spot in relation to what?
Life, anything. Or if you were to complete the sentence of like, Ali, like from what I know of you, my hallucination is that you could be even more fulfilled if ...
I think I would have answered it differently 3 years ago than I do today, because I think your arc over the last 3 years, from what I know about you then and what I've learned about you over the years and what I see today, you have gotten incredibly close to a life of contentment without losing your ambition. A lot of times people think you have to choose between wanting to achieve and being content, right? That you have to choose enough versus more. I think you have found a way that very few people ever figure out their entire lives of you both enjoy what you have and don't feel a desire to have more because you feel you lack, but you have a desire for more because it feels fun and exciting to see what you're capable of. I don't know what your definition of fulfillment is. We can talk about that. But I think based on the general definition of fulfillment, self-actualization, those types of things, it seems like you have put very deliberate effort into aligning your life with your definition of that. What is your perspective?
Yeah, I would say I broadly agree. I'm always on the hunt for like blind spots in the sense of like in the sense of I have consciously aligned my life with what I think fulfillment, freedom, and all that kind of stuff looks like. And then I'm always like, well, but I mean, I don't have all the answers. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe I'm like for example, the meditation thing. Maybe there's like levels to this game that I'm not even aware of. Like Joe Hudson describes his like level of consciousness as like drastically different now than it was like 30 years ago for him. And so I'm like, huh, that's interesting. You know, all I know right now is my own current level of consciousness. But maybe there's like, maybe there is more to be explored there. Again, just for fun. So when I read like the spiritual books and stuff like that and do the Joe Hudson-esque exercises and retreats and things, it's sort of from that lens of like, yeah, I feel like 10 out of 10 contented right now, but maybe the scale actually goes up to 20. Maybe it goes up to 100 and I'm just not aware of that yet. Isn't that exciting? Like, that's really cool.
Well, so like with identity and stuff, there are two kind of main ways I like to think about it. Either you construct your identity because, you know, we contain multitudes. You're not a singular thing. You have multiple identities. So then it's a matter of, you know, life becomes, how do I construct the identity or identities that I want? How do I become the person I want to be? But the other is from like a Buddhist perspective, where my understanding of it is you are born with Buddha nature. Like everyone is basically born a Buddha. So in order to access that, it isn't that you have to add more or become a Buddha. You already are one. Your job is to remove what isn't your Buddha nature. So enlightenment, nirvana, all this other shit is more so the perspective of how do I remove what isn't me, societal expectations, inherited values, insecurities, you know, toxic personal narratives, all this other shit. How do I remove everything that isn't me so that I can get to who I truly am on an individual level? And I really like that aspect because then it kind of, you don't come from a place of lacking, of less than, of a deficit. It's more so you are great and whole by default. So then your job is saying, what isn't me? How do I remove what isn't me so that I can just be me? that to me just feels more holistic and just a healthier way to look at it, rather than I'm not enough as I am. I need to go out and find something else.
Nice. Love it. That's the goal.
Yeah. So honestly, man, like I would love to sit here and tell you, oh, I have found this blind spot you have, or this super secret thing that only I as a psychologist would see. Honestly, man, you seem like you're doing really fucking well. And, even leading up to this, I watched a bunch of interviews and videos and shit you did over the last, year or two. You have a weird knack for being whole and complete, but also saying, yeah, but there could be an extra level. Not because like I have to get to that level so much as, okay, but I get one life. Like, let me just see if there is another level. Like if there's not, cool, now I know. Yeah. Dude, like you seem so fucking good. Like I'd love to be able to say, hey, here's the thing that, we could totally spend the next 3 months working on. Dude, you seem whole. You seem content. You seem like you have built the life we talked about you building 3 years ago. I'm so fucking happy for you.
Nice. Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a fun journey. And yeah, thank you for your counsel and guidance en route.
Cool. Any parting words for today?
Not particularly. Yeah, big thank you to everyone who's listened this far in the conversation. It's been quite meandering in the best of ways, and I always love kind of these conversations that feel more like conversations rather than a podcast interview. So thank you for that, Corey. And yeah, all the best with your book and with the podcast.
Also, one more thing before you go. If you enjoyed this episode, there are 2 things you can do to share the wealth. 1, send this episode to someone who needs to hear this message and tell them why it was so impactful for you. 2, take like literally 3 seconds to either like or leave a hopefully 5-star review, but be honest, because there's a lot of fluff and bullshit out there, and people are looking for content that's actually valuable. So a little social proof from people like you giving the show a good review goes a long way. Thanks for listening/watching, and until next time, take it easy.